Hello everyone, and welcome to the Fictional Vortex. So we are back with an interesting movie on What If Naruto Awakens, the eventual Sharingan of Danny Phantom. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. It had been many years since the end of the Fourth Great Shinobi War. While some villains had come and gone, trying to disrupt the peace that had been firmly established, their plots always failed in the end. Peace remained strong not just because of the strong bond that was held between each major village, a bond that many believed impossible at one point in time. It was also because of the actions between two men with powers that why shinobi of their time considered to be godly. These two had used their above extraordinary abilities to handle any threats that would befall the elemental nations. One example was when a madman by name of Tonari had tried to plunge the moon into the earth. While one of the heroes, Uzumaki Naruto, went to battle Tonari, the other stayed behind to watch over the village, to protect it from the shadows like he told the blonde he would. The other man's name is Uchiha Sasuke. Many events have taken place after that certain incident. Uzumaki Naruto had wed the princess of the Hyuga clan, Hyuga Hinata, and she bore him two children, Boruto and Hawarimi. Sasuke himself ended up marrying the woman who had been stubbornly chasing after him for a long period of time. His former teammate and apprentice to Tsunade, her name was Haruno Sakura. She ended up conceiving a daughter by the name of Sarada. Naruto had fulfilled his lifelong goal of being the Hokage while Sasuke himself had traveled all over the nations, trying to atone for the sins he had caused in his youth. It wasn't till their children had graduated the academy that the two were once again needed to save the world from two other members of the Otsutsuki clan, Momoshiki and his partner, Kinshiki. Needless to say, a battle that made the very land tremble had taken place, with godlike abilities being thrown around like they had been going out of style. But in the end, with the aid of Boruto, Momoshiki had been defeated and peace once again blossomed in the elemental nations. Now decades had passed since that battle, and at the moment we could find Uchiha Sasuke standing in the middle of Konoha's cemetery. Sasuke felt the wind brush past him, but he paid it no mind as the autumn air made him feel a bit relaxed. Sasuke had changed a lot over the years. His once onyx and smooth black hair had now grayed, and signs of aging was definitely seen on the Uchiha's face. Sasuke smiled solemnly as he read two names on a certain gravestone: Uzumaki Hyuga Hinata and Uzumaki Namikaze Naruto. Yes, the hero of Konohagakure and his wife had finally passed on. Most believed that Naruto would have outlived them all due to his Uzumaki lineage. But his old best friend didn't want it that way. He wanted to pass on to the next life with his wife when it was her time. Using a certain array of seals, Naruto managed to speed up his life span and had actually stored it into seals. Before Naruto passed, he once again showed his remarkable compassion for the people of his village. He donated the scrolls to terminally ill children. Needless to say, the children that were fortunate enough to receive the lifespan from Naruto was no longer sick or in need of care. Sasuke suddenly coughed into his only available hand. His body retched and shivered as he continued to cough. After a moment, he retracted his hand and seen blood on his palm. Yes, Uchiha Sasuke was sick with the same disease his older brother had once had. An undesirable ironic twist of fate it seemed. Sasuke had no doubt he could use his Rinnegan and the creation of all things technique to bring forth a cure. But he decided against it. He had lived a long and hard life. He was ready to cross over to the other side. A smirk found its way onto Sasuke's lips. "You can come on out, Sarada." Sarada leapt from her hiding spot in the trees and landed just a few feet from her father. Sarada had definitely matured and filled out nicely over the years. Sasuke glanced back towards his only child, admiring the fact that his own flesh and blood had grown into a powerful young woman. Obviously not as strong as himself, but then again, not everyone could have the same powers as the Raikudo Sennin. "I figured I'd find you here, father," Sarada said with a smile. He often visited the cemetery these days, paying his respects to his old friend. "Am I becoming that predictable child?" "I'm not a child anymore, Dad," Sarada huffed. Despite her age, her father always referred to her as a child. Sarada yelped slightly when Sasuke suddenly appeared before her and poked her roughly on the forehead. Younger than me and you'll always be my daughter. Sasuke smiled as he watched his daughter rub her forehead, reminding him of his younger days when Itachi poked his forehead. So I'll call you whatever I please. Baka. Sarah muttered under her breath. What was that? Sasuke asked, his only visible eye raised in questioning. Nothing, Dad. Sarada's smile returned. She loved her father very much, but the man could be a pain in the ass at some points. Anyways, I was wondering if you could come over tonight and watch Azula. Me and Boruto-kun have a mission to go on. Yes, it was true. Not only was Uchiha Sarada now a full-grown woman, but she was a mother as well. Meaning Sasuke himself was indeed a grandfather. Sasuke, even though he wouldn't admit it out loud, adored his granddaughter. Azula was about 3 years old, has small tufts of black hair, onyx eyes and whisker marks laid on each of her cheeks. Might be due to the fact Boruto has similar marks on his cheek, so either the marks are genetic or some small portions of Kurama's chakra had passed from Boruto to Azula. It didn't matter either way. Sure, I'll be able to come watch her tonight. What's the mission? Some bandits raided a local town nearby, stolen all these valuables and apparently murdered a few of the civilians. Boruto-kun and I have been tasked with locating and bringing them back here to face justice. I shouldn't be surprised, Sasuke said with a shake of his head. Even in times of peace there will always be small bouts of mischief. I guess it can't be helped. Unfortunately, Dad, not everyone desires peace, no matter how deep you try to look within their hearts. Sarada said. The female Uchiha glanced down and seen the small glob of blood resting on her father's palm. She frowned. The sickness is getting worse, huh? Yes, Sasuke simply said. Are you sure you don't want to get it healed? No, I understand, Sarada said. Her voice had dropped to a smaller pitch. Sasuke shook his head slightly when he noticed small tear droplets form around her eyes. He could understand why, of course. Her father was dying. He's the only one with the ability to cure his own disease, yet he didn't want to. It was probably a heart-wrenching thing, but yet Sasuke didn't feel what she did. Don't cry for me, child. Shedding them would be wasted on me, Sasuke said. I just hate the fact that I can't do anything to cure you, father. I hate knowing me and Boruto-kun's baby girl is going to grow up without really knowing her grandfather, and I hate knowing I'm going to lose you, father. Tears trailed down her cheeks now as she sobbed quietly. Sasuke cupped his child's cheeks and brushed away her tears. Don't think of this as a goodbye forever, child. When I finally pass on, think of it more as I'll see you soon. Will I truly see you again, even in death, father? Kami willing, Sasuke said with a smile. Sarada eventually regained her own smile. In his own way, he knew how to cheer up her when she was feeling low. I love you, Dad. Sarada smiled before she turned and leapt away. She had about 20 minutes to report to the Hokage's office, and no matter how much she didn't want to leave that spot, she had a mission to accomplish. And besides, Sasuke wasn't one to use the word love commonly. Sasuke watched as his daughter disappeared from his sight. I love you too, Sarada. He turned back to the graves of his best friend. I know you can hear me, Dobi, somehow and I figured you already know what my plan is. I've been wondering for so long now. What will happen to our world once we've finally passed on, and truthfully I'm a bit shaken at the possibilities. He stared at his friend's grave. Maybe in some way he was hoping to get a response from his best friend. To see what the blonde knucklehead thought of his plan. But all he got was silence, the eerie silence that comes with the unfortunate prospect of death. So I'll continue watching over this world, even if it means giving up my happiness in the afterlife for the moment. I'll do what my ancestor or Indra did before me and keep passing my power on through the upcoming generations. But you know I'm no fool as well, only the ones I find worthy to wield my power will be able to access it. Sasuke said. He traced the name of his best friend. This is goodbye, for now, Dobi. He started to make his way out of the cemetery before he stopped, his only visible eye glancing at one grave in particular. The name engraved on that stone meant just as much to him as Naruto's did. He walked over to the grave, channeling power into his eyes. Beneath his bangs, his eye morphed into the Eye of Legend and the most powerful of dojutsus. The Rinnegan. Using a bit of his power that the eye granted him, Sasuke materialized a lone flower and placed it on the grave. This is also goodbye for now too, my dear. I hope you'll still be waiting for me. With those final words, Sasuke left the cemetery. The grave he had placed the flower on was none other than his deceased wife, Haruno Uchiha Sakura. Within the following year, Uchiha Sasuke had finally succumbed to the sickness that had once been killing his brother. Though his body was buried in a secure location, in order to keep anybody from stealing his eyes and trying to gain the power of the Sharingan and Rinnegan, his chakra and spirit continued on. As generation after generation came and went, he continued to linger on. Almost in a limbo sort of realm, like his ancestors before him. He was searching for one of his lineage that he considered worthy and would bring about a good change to the world, one that wouldn't abuse his power and abilities. 1,000 years had passed before the world had been rocked by a massive earthquake. The once massive continent of the elemental nations had actually split up and been divided on the planet, Eve. Surely the divided pieces of the elemental nations had gotten renamed and became their own continent. Technology back then had all but been lost and humanity had to restart again, the knowledge of chakra, jutsu and shinobi disappeared within the sands of time. But as time passed, humanity flourished and the advancement of technology continued on. The lineage of each clan had spread all throughout the world, most civilians not even being aware of the power they possessed. But that's not what this story is about. No, this story will start in America, one of the biggest chunks of the elemental Tions and was once known as the Land of Fire. It starts in a small town called Amity Park and with a family called the Fentons. Most importantly though, it starts with a young man by the name of Danny Fenton and his sister, Danielle Fenton. Amity Park, the Fenton house. So they actually finished building it, huh? A female teen asked as she gazed at the rather impressive creation in front of her. The female had black hair that was currently in a ponytail and clear blue eyes. She wore a white t-shirt that stopped just a little bit above her navel and the shirt had a red circle within the middle of it. Finishing off her outfit was a pair of jeans. This female's name is Danielle Fenton, the youngest sibling of the Fenton family. I'll never understand why they put so much effort into this machine. A male voice replied. He had black hair similar to Danielle's but his was spiked out. He wore a black t-shirt with a giant grinning skull logo on the front. Finishing off his outfit, the male wore black jeans with a chain running through the loops like a belt and black running shoes. This is the oldest male sibling, Danny Fenton. Don't they know by now ghosts don't exist? This is about ghosts again. Tucker Foley asked. Tucker was a young African-American male with glasses and wore a red beanie on his head. He considered himself to be quite the ladies' man even though he's never been on an official date and all the ladies at Casper High were not interested in him in the slightest. Yeah, apparently they built a portal that leads into the dimension where all ghosts reside, the G.H. Ost Zone, Danny said while his hands gestured towards the invention. The invention, which was dubbed by the Fenton twins as the Ghost Portal, was a large metal hexagon with all sorts of wirings going through it. The inside of the machine was so complex looking that the three had no doubt they could describe the technology that the Fenton parents used. Despite the jokes made towards them, to build something as neat looking as the Ghost Portal took a very ingenious mind. Does it work? Tucker asked while examining the machine. Nah, Mom and Dad tried to turn it on last night and the thing sparked for a moment before dying, Danielle answered. Tucker continued his own examination of the machine, looking for anything out of place that might be causing the machine to not function properly. After a few moments, he sighed slightly. He didn't see any issues on the outer interior. Well, maybe I could help somehow, Tucker said. We all know I'm the geek of the group and very good with technology. Maybe I can get it working. Get what working, Tuck? Danny asked, looking at his friend with an amused expression. Fix a portal that leads to nowhere. It doesn't hurt to try and fix it, Danny. She will make Mom and Dad really happy to see one of their inventions finally work. Danielle suddenly gained a smirk of her own. Besides, you're not afraid, are you? Danny narrowed his eyes at his sister. She knew better than anybody he wasn't afraid of much. Danny was known to get into altercations with the other guys at school, mostly a jock by the name of Dash Baxter, due to almost everyone in a Midi knowing about their parents' ghost obsession. They would mock and tease Danny, he brushed it off without a care in the world. But when the popular crowd once made Danielle cry with their harsh taunts, then the kid gloves came off, so to speak. His mother, Maddie Fenton, being a 9th-degree black belt, had trained her son in the art of self-defense at a young age. Even she was aware that their obsession drew the wrong type of attention towards her family, so she wanted to make sure her kids could defend themselves. Fine, Danny huffed. Let's fix the damn thing. Great. Danielle instantly ran to get herself a protective jumpsuit. Aren't you going to get a jumpsuit as well? Tucker asked, watching as the youngest Fenton rummaged through the many lockers in the family lab, trying to find appropriate clothing for fixing the portal. Hell no, Danny scoffed. You would never catch me wearing something as ridiculous as a jumpsuit. But if wearing one makes Danielle happy, then I won't say anything. Got it. It only took a few more moments till Danielle returned with a jumpsuit on. She did a quick spin to show off the outfit. So how do I look? Suddenly both males broke out in laughter. What's so funny? Danielle asked, confused as to why Danny and Tucker both started laughing. Why don't you look down? Tucker started. And get Dad's face off your chest, Danny finished. Donnie. Elle looked down and almost screamed in fright as a large logo of her father's face was plastered on the jumpsuit. She instantly ripped it off, crumpled it and tossed it away. Her face burned in ember. Harassment as both finally finished off their laughing fits. Let's just get this thing going, Danielle huffed. She began to make her way towards the machine. Sure thing. With that being said, both Fenton children entered the non-working portal, searching with their hands for any sort of issue. It was a bit dark in the machine and made it hard to see. On the outside of the Fenton portal, Tucker was scanning the blueprints of the portal. Tucker knew without a doubt that his best friend's parents were geniuses. If they weren't so infatuated with ghosts, they could make a real living off their inventions. As Tucker was finishing up his scan of the prints, his blood stopped cold as he recognized one major flaw in the machine. The on button was inside the machine. Guys, Tucker called out to them. Stop moving around in there and come out. What did you say, Tuck? Danny asked before he heard a distinctive clicking noise, like the sound of a button being pushed. Then the next moment, Danny's world lighted up and all he saw was white. He felt excruciating pain run up and down his body. And he could swear that he could hear Tucker again calling out for them and Danielle's cries of agony. The horrible pain didn't last forever though, because eventually Danny's vision went black and was embraced in the world of unconsciousness. Well, that's the end of chapter 1. Yes, I know I didn't intro Duce Sam into the first chapter, and I have a good reason for it. She and Danny are not friends yet, but she will come later in the story. What her role will be, well, you'll just have to wait and see. Winking face. And yes, Danny will be a bit OC in this story. Anyways, hope you all enjoyed the first of many chapters. Master of the Unknown. Meeting Sasuke. Got beef. Back with the second chapter of the story. Now, I'm pretty sure everyone already has a good idea what's going to happen with Danielle and Danny. But I'm not going to give all my secrets away. There's a reason Sam hasn't shown up in the story yet. I've got a special part for her later in the story. But until that time comes, let's get on with this story. I own nothing, of course. NDP 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 XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX moment he was in his parents' lab, trying to get that damn portal of theirs to work. Next thing he knows he feels the worst pain he's ever felt in his life. And he wakes up in this abyss of nothingness. Maybe Tucker and his sister was pulling a fast one on him. He looked before him and noticed just a total vast of emptiness. He almost felt the air was saturated with the darkness surrounding him. Yet despite how dark it was, he could see everything before him, yet there was nothing to see at all. So Danny did the most logical thing he could think of. He began walking. It was better than standing around doing nothing. Danny didn't know how long he had been walking for. Could only have been a few minutes or hell maybe a few hours. Now most would act out in this type of situation, but Danny found himself to be surprisingly calm. Why that was, even he didn't know. "Hello, anybody there?" Danny finally called out. tired of the vast eerie silence that came along with the darkness. Suddenly, as if to answer his question, a bright light erupted from within the darkness and Danny had to shield himself from it. Once the glow of the light finally died down, he lowered his arms to see that the light he had just seen had taken the form of a door. Kind of like one you would see in those cheesy movies where the hero is about to forever change his destiny or something. Are you going to stand there and look at it all day or come forward? A bored-sounding and rather rude voice asked him. Danny merely huffed at the voice but decided to dignify it with a response. Mostly due to his curiosity. Who are you? Or better yet, where am I? Danny asked the voice. All your questions will be answered soon, now hurry up. Wow, a disembodied voice is giving me commands now, Danny said before sighing. I must be out of my mind, he finished with a mumble before making his way into the light. As soon as he crossed into the light, his whole world literally changed around him. Danny now found himself in an open field. The sky was clear and a bright blue, the sun shining bright. The grass in the field was a vibrant green and it reached up to his knees on the calf. He turned and found that not only was he in some sort of open field but there was a shore next to him. He watched as the waves of the ocean rocked against the shore before receding back. First I'm in some black abyss and now I'm here, Danny mumbled. I must be losing my mind. Not exactly losing your mind. More like on the inside of your mind, the same male voice from earlier said. Danny turned to face the voice and found himself face to face with someone he had never seen before. You all know what Sasuke looks like, so no need to describe him. Who are you? Danny asked, a bit apprehensively. His eyes fixated on the man. He noted the way the man was standing. He would be ready to attack Danny at any moment if the teen should try anything. Stupid. And the fact there was a long sword strapped on the man's back kept Danny at a distance as well. My name. The man smirked, full of arrogance, yet he gave off a friendly aura. It was a weird combination. Uchiha Sasuke is my name, or better translated in the English language, Sasuke Uchiha. Sasuke Uchiha. Danny tried out Sasuke's name. It was a strange name to say the least. He had never heard of a name like that, it seemed foreign. His thoughts didn't dwell on the name for too long as it returned to what Sasuke had said moments ago. What do you mean inside of your mind? I thought I was clear with my words when I had said that, but if I must repeat myself, Sasuke sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. We're inside your mind. This is a physical manifestation of your mind. Sasuke gestured to the world around them. If this is my mind, then what was that whole black abyss I was just in? You've never entered your mind like this before and had no idea what you were doing or how to access it. So I had to guide you to the right place, Sasuke said. Well, thanks, I guess. So how do I get out of here? Danny asked. He had no real clue why a stranger was in his mind. Hell, Danny honestly believed this was all a dream at the moment. You can't, Sasuke said, and had to resist his usual smirk when he seen Danny tense. Not yet, at the moment at least. Why's that? It's because you're in a coma, Sasuke answered. I'm in a coma, Danny asked, trying to process what he meant. What do you? His words died in his throat as flashbacks of the accident hit his mind. He remembered walking in the portal with Danielle. A giant flash of light and the most excruciating pain he's ever felt in his life. Then he believed he blacked out. Yes, the portal, Sasuke said, as if he had been reading Danny's thoughts. Once the portal was switched on, a large concentration of ectoplasm attacked your body and tried to infuse itself on your DNA. But within the first hour your body began rejecting the sudden change to your DNA structure and pattern. Truthfully, you should have been dead by now. If I should have died, then how come I'm still alive then? Danny asked. Sasuke looked annoyed. The Uchiha didn't really like it when people interrupted him in the middle of his explanation, but Danny was probably still confused about what was going on, so he would let it slide. That would be because of me. To explain how I'm even here in the first place, I need to start from the beginning. My origin. It all started many centuries ago, back in a village known as Konohagakure, in one of the strongest clans to ever walk the face of the earth. The Uchiha clan. And from then on, Danny listened as Sasuke explained his life story. He explained himself growing up in the village hidden in the leaves. Sasuke went on to explain going through the Shinobi Academy. Meeting his one-day rival and best friend, Sasuke got all the way up to where he defected from his village when suddenly Danny started laughing. Sasuke expected any reactions that Danny was going to have. This wasn't really one of those he was expecting. "Why are you laughing?" "Because this is one of the craziest dreams I've ever had," Danny said while wiping a tear from his eye. "Man, I wish I could have more dreams like this. It was awesome. I should be waking up any second though." "That's what you think this is, huh?" Sasuke whispered. "A dream? Well, of course I do. I mean, come on, just think about it. People with the abilities to run up walls, on water, bend the elements and use them for crazy attacks, these jutsu as you called them, and so much more. There's no way that any of this could be real," Danny said confidently and with a huff. Sasuke just shook his head. Oh, the ignorance of youth. But then again, after sorting through Danny's memories, it seemed to him that the knowledge of chakra and jutsu had disappeared altogether from mankind. "Would you like to test your theory, child?" "How so?" "Well, if this is truly a dream, then let's say if you should get attacked, then your body shouldn't react to the pain. That the body you have right now is just a physical manifestation for your dream and not connected to your earthly body in any way, correct?" Sasuke said. Danny was confused a bit. Having never studied anything related to the study of dreams, he had no idea what Sasuke was talking about. But he was confident should something happen to this body, he would just wake up in the real world, where there was no Sasuke, and his sister and best friend would be okay. "I guess so." As soon as the words left Danny's mouth, Sasuke suddenly appeared before Danny, causing the teen to gasp in surprise. Danny didn't have time to react as Sasuke lightly punched Danny in the gut. Well, lightly for Sasuke felt different for Danny. Danny acted out a bit of saliva as the air rushed from his lungs. Danny had to restrain himself from falling to his knees. That one punch from Sasuke hurt him a lot more than when he got hit from Dash when the two fought. Sasuke stepped back from Danny. "Still believe this is a dream?" Sasuke asked. Danny regained his breath and rushed at Sasuke. Sasuke simply sidestepped and pushed Danny on past. Danny growled before trying to attack again, this time throwing his fist and trying to hit Sasuke in the jaw. Sasuke simply used his one and only free hand to capture the approaching appendage. Sasuke let go and dropped low, swinging his leg around, and he ended up sweeping Danny off his feet. Danny hit the ground hard with a thud. Danny was about to get up, only to stop dead in his tracks as he noticed Sasuke's fist was covered in what appeared to be lightning, and it was directed towards his face. "If I had wanted it, you'd have already been dead. You are far from my level of skill, child," the way Sasuke said. That left no doubt in his mind. But Danny's mind was in a state of shock. This should have been a dream. The attacks Sasuke had inflicted on him shouldn't have hurt, but yet they did. The GHTNING around Sasuke's hand vanished and he gave the Fenton male some space. Danny cautiously got back to his feet, watching Sasuke carefully as if the Uchiha would attack him again. "Okay, maybe there is more to this than just being a dream," Danny admitted. "Like I said before, this isn't a dream, child. We're in your mind. When your body was hit with all that ectoplasm and put you on the verge of death, it had awoken me from my slumber in order to save you," Sasuke said. "Look, I'm tired of beating around the bush here, Danny, because I can already see on your face that you're still a bit confused, so I'll be blunt about it. You're my descendant, one of the last living members of the proud Uchiha clan." Danny's mind went blank, trying to process that bit of info. After figuring out that there was more to this than being a dream, Sasuke just told him he was not only his descendant but also had the blood of the Uchiha running through his veins. So he responded with the only word he could think of at the moment. "Sweet." Danny grinned. With Danielle and Tucker, Danielle watched her brother with a frown. It had been a few days since the accident involving the portal. She had surprisingly come out with no injuries. Strange new powers, sure, but no injuries. Danielle couldn't help but feel in a way she was responsible. She shouldn't have gone into the portal. If they would have just left the machine alone, then her brother wouldn't be in a coma. "He's going to be just fine, you know," Tucker said. Despite how sure he sounded, he couldn't help but be upset at the state his longtime best friend was in. "I know," Danielle whispered. As Dad said, He's a Fenton and Fentons can get through anything. That's the spirit, Danielle. Now come on, we have to get going to school. I promise after school we will be right back at Danny's side. Danielle gave her best friend a smile. She looked at Danny one last time. He didn't seem to be in pain at all. He just looked as if he was sleeping. She hoped he would be fine. Danielle wouldn't know what to do without her big brother. As they were leaving the hospital room, something came to Danielle's mind. So what's this I hear about the school wanting to change the lunch menu? With Sasuke and Danny. Sasuke watched as Danny had sat down in the imaginative grass that surrounded them. After getting Danny to understand that he was the last of the Uchiha bloodline and his only known living descendant, Sasuke decided it was time to assist Danny in unlocking his chakra. Sasuke, while being completely aware that Danny was his descendant, was a bit confused as to why his spirit had awoken in Danny. Was Danny supposed to play some big part in the future that might be vital to the world? Was something big going to happen to the world that it required his return? Sasuke was unaware, but if it meant training his rather pathetically weak descendant, then he would. It's not an easy task, Danny, Sasuke said, watching as Danny's face scrunched up in concentration. He had heard the way Sasuke explained to unlock this chakra within, but right now he was having a hell of a time doing it. The reason it's harder for you than it was for the people of my time is because no human has learned to access their chakra for a very long time. And accessing your chakra is like a muscle. The less you use it, the weaker it becomes. Danny merely grunted in response, choosing not to say anything witty but more to focus on that inner energy. It definitely was a bitch to do. After what seemed like forever, Sasuke noticed small wisps of energy began to encircle Danny's form. The small wisps were blue in color and it began to thicken and get bigger until it started to hug his body like a small flame. Sasuke smiled slightly at the sight. It took even so many academy students days to unlock their chakra, and here Danny had done it in a few measly hours. He had to guess it was because of his presence in Danny's body. Is this chakra? Danny asked, feeling the powerful surge of energy flowing through him. He looked down at his hands and seen the wisps of chakra wrapped around him. I feel so strong. Like I'll be able to do anything. Don't get too ahead of yourself, Danny. You just unlocked your chakra and have no idea how to use it. Sasuke's onyx eyes bored into Danny. You'll have to take time to get used to this power and then I'll start teaching you how to use it. In the meantime, I recommend training your body on the outside of your mind. Why? Danny suddenly asked. Why do I even need to train in the first place? Sasuke huffed. He was hoping the teen wouldn't ask questions, but it seemed unavoidable. Sure, he could lie to Danny, but Sasuke seen no real point in doing that. Before my death so long ago, I made it a recommendation that, if any of my transmigrations were to unlock my power, it would have to be due to the fact something big is going to happen. I'm unsure if that something big is just for this town or even the whole world. But I've awakened, so that means the world is going to need you, Danny. Well, when you're ready. Wow, that's a lot to take in. Sure, putting a lot of weight on my shoulders there, sensei. Sasuke simply did a grunt. I wouldn't have taught you to unlock your chakra if I feel like you didn't have any potential, brat. Now quit your babbling and get going. Despite how the response ended, Danny couldn't help but smile. Thank you, sensei. With the Fenton parents, Jack and Maddie were making their way towards the hospital room. They had not spent as much time working on inventions since they flew out their portal had been the cause of their son being put into a coma. As they stood outside Danny's room, Jack suddenly wrapped his large hands around his wife's shoulder. What's on your mind, honey? Maddie suddenly choked on her words. Jack could see small tears trailing down her cheeks. Do you think Danny will ever forgive us for this? Maddie cried. I don't want him to hate us. Honey, I may not be the smartest of men, Jack said, his face unusually stern. Maddie knew her husband could be serious when he wanted to be. He hid it behind a veil of idiocy and his ghost obsession. But I know our son, he's not going to hate us. You just have to be strong, my love. Maddie gave her husband a nod before they both opened the door. And once the door had been opened, it showed a joyous sight to both parents. Standing by the window, glancing outside as the sun shined inside, was their son Danny. Danny smiled as he heard his parents enter the room. He glanced back at them. He's right, you know, Mom. Of course I forgive you. With Danielle, it had been a rather crazy week for the newly turned half-ghost child aka Danielle Fenton. She had been struggling to deal with her crazy powers along with checking up on her brother in the hospital. Combine that with battling a ghostly cafeteria lady, well, her life has definitely turned upside down and inside out. Speaking of that crazy lunch lady though. Lunch anybody? A loud female voice shouted. It belonged to a massive monster made of meat. Students that had gathered around to see strange phenomenon of the beast taking form, began to panic and run, hoping not to meet an early demise at the hands of this creature. Meat, why have you betrayed me? Tucker cried out dramatically. Danielle rolled her eyes. Her friend could be such a drama queen. Tucker, cover me, Danielle said. Tucker wrapped Danielle in a hug and spun her around to shield her from the view of the other students. Tucker closed his eyes as a bright light radiated before him at such a close proximity. Danielle gave Tucker a quick thanks before taking off into the sky. Danielle reached the beast within mere moments. Hey, you rotten hunk of beef. You're outdated and out of time, she said. Danielle also internally smacked herself. That line sounded so much cooler in her head. Instead of getting a response, Danielle avoided a massive meaty fist. She flew around the giant and landed a kick that shook the meat monster. The meat monster wasn't down for long though, as it finally connected with a right hoe. Okay, that sent Danielle soaring through the air. I hope she can take a punch, Tucker muttered. Danielle recovered and sped down from the sky at the beast with the speed and force of a missile. Needless to say, as soon as she collided with the meat monster, it exploded into a shower of various meats and other foods. Danielle found herself laying in a crater, and with a groan she pulled herself out. Are you okay? The concerned and elderly voice of the lunch lady asked. Danielle looked at her for a moment before shrugging her shoulders. Little bruises here and there. Well, tough, the lunch lady said harshly and took a swing at Danielle. Danielle ducked under the oncoming fist. She had never been much of a fighter, but if it meant saving her town and friends, she damn well was going to do her best. Danielle struck out with her own fist and actually connected with the lunch lady's jaw, causing the elderly ghost to stumble a bit. Danielle followed up her attack though. She raced forward and landed an uppercut. Not being able to control her newfound strength yet, she used more than expected and sent the lunch lady flying into the air. Danielle pursued her though. The lunch lady growled and began to fire off projectiles of meat. From slabs of beef to turkey legs, it all went flying at Danielle. She dodged a few of them but never reached the lunch lady because said ghost appeared before her and hammer-fisted Danielle back into the ground. Danielle skipped a few times on the grass before halting. Ouch! Danielle muttered, rubbing her sore cranium. She was still a novice at fighting. And Danielle wasn't an idiot to believe she could actually defeat this woman in combat. She probably had more experience than Danielle herself did. So she needed a plan. Danielle reached around in backpack she had forgotten to take off and pulled out the Fenton thermos. What's this supposed to do? Danielle muttered. Didn't her dad say it was supposed to capture ghosts and keep them contained within it? Soup is not on the menu for today, child. The lunch lady shrieked. When I'm through with you, the menu at this school will remain the same for the rest of eternity, she charged towards Danielle. I don't think so, Danielle shouted defiantly before pointing the thermos at the lunch lady. She prayed that it would work. As she concentrated, Danielle was unaware that she was charging the Fenton thermos. A blue light escaped from within the thermos and surrounded the lunch lady. The lunch lady felt a massive pull and couldn't stop herself being dragged towards the thermos. With a cry of defeat, the lunch lady was pulled into the thermos and the blue light faded. Danielle smirked in relief as she dropped from her ghost form. It was over and she was ready for a well-earned nap. Well, that's where I'll end this chapter. On the next chapter, it will be sometime after the Meat Monster episode of Danny Phantom. Now Danny won't get all the crazy jutsu right away. He's going to earn his power. Anyway, hope you like the chapter. Master of the Unknown. Dances and Dragons. Here with chapter 3 of Not Everything Has to Be Ghostly. So far, believe it or not, I'm enjoying writing this story. And it seems everyone is liking it too. I don't own anything related to Naruto or Danny Phantom, so let's get on with it. Before I forget though, I'm changing the timeline a bit to where the next chapter took place a little while after Danielle fought the lunch lady. I own nothing. XXXDPDPDPDNUNUNUNUDPDPDPDPDPNUNUNUXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX Old male of the family was doing what he did best. Or at least what he thought he did best. And that was catching ghosts. What could possibly be his methods on catching these ghosts? Jack was doing the best thing that he believed would help him capture an experiment on a ghost. Jack Fenton was sitting on a chair, dressed in his usual jumpsuit, and was wearing a hat on his head that held 2 soda cans. 2 tubes ran from the soda cans, which allowed him access to drink the liquid. In his hands though was what looked to be a fishing pole. That's right everyone, the brilliant Jack Fenton was fishing for ghosts. It just so happened that at this moment, our favorite ghost girl was walking down the stairs with her backpack on her shoulders. Danielle looked at her dad, wondering just what crazy idea he had come up with. Dad, what are you? Danielle didn't even get to finish her question before her father raised his hand to silence her. Be quiet Danielle, you're going to scare away the ghosts, Jack said while Danielle rolled her eyes. Yes, her voice was so loud and terrifying that any spectral being would flee from it. She watched as her father gestured towards the pole in his hand. This is the Fenton Ghost Fisher. It has a line attached to it that no ghost can escape from should they get ensnared on it, he said proudly before turning back towards the portal. Dad, I hate to sound skeptical, but I highly doubt you're going to catch something with this device. No honey, don't be such a party pooper. Ever since the portal started working, your mother and I have been determined to use this opportunity to catch a ghost. If you say so. Suddenly her father's stomach rumbled violently. Danielle gave him a look while he quickly shot to his feet. That soda really went right through me, Jack said before forcing the Fenton Ghost Fisher into his daughter's hands. Here, take this, I'll be right back after I use the Fenton latrine. With that being said, her father took off up the stairs in a rush. It seemed fate, or whatever you wish to call it, enjoyed making Danielle's life complicated. Danielle felt the line on the pole begin to pull violently towards the portal. With as much strength as she could muster, Danielle pulled against the unknown force on the other end of the line. Snap! Danielle watched as the line on her pole dropped to the ground, showing that it had indeed been snapped. Suddenly 2 transparent and massive claws reached out of the ghost portal. The claws began to pull at the tiled floor of the basement, and within moments, in the middle of the Fenton basement, stood a massive dragon. Shit, Danielle muttered with wide eyes. She had thought dragons were a myth, a fable told by parents and grandparents to entertain children. Obviously there was truth to it as she was staring the beast in the eyes. I want to go. The dragon actually spoke to her, grinning the whole time. Danielle did the most logical thing she could think of. She turned around and ran from the beast. Danielle didn't get far though, as the massive claw of the dragon wrapped itself around her much smaller frame. I have to go. Danielle sighed. It looked like the only option she had left was to fight. And she really had wanted to avoid that option. Not sure if you'll want to once my dad is finished in there, she said before summoning her powers. In a bright flash, Danielle had morphed into her alter ego, Danielle Phantom. Danielle turned intangible and phased out of the dragon's grip. The ghostly dragon looked surprised by this before its eyes narrowed at Danielle. The dragon took a swipe at Danielle, who flew around the massive appendage. Danielle even had to dodge a column of flame the dragon released from its mouth. This is getting out of hand, Danielle muttered before flying top speed at the dragon. She reared her leg back and with a well-executed kick, sent the dragon flying towards the portal. Danielle missed the golden necklace fall from the dragon's neck and land into her backpack. Danielle stood floating near the dragon cautiously, waiting for the creature to make its next move. Imagine Danielle's surprise when the dragon looked at him adly before going through a transformation of its own. The dragon began to shrink and morph until it took on the form of a young woman. Danielle could hear the young woman sobbing. All I wanted to do was go to the costume ball. The woman sobbed before looking at Danielle. But my mommy wouldn't let me, and with those final words, the woman was seemingly dragged back into the portal. I'm sorry, Danielle muttered. Her words reached nobody as it was only her alone in that basement. Danielle reverted back to normal. It would probably be best for her health if her father didn't see her in her ghost form. As she landed on the floor of the basement, her phone began to ring. Once she picked the device out of her pocket, she smiled a bit at who was calling her. "Hello," Danielle said, mentally smacking herself for how lame that sounded. "Donnie, it's good to finally talk to you again. I should apologize for not having called sooner," a bit of a raspy male voice replied on the other end of the phone. "Oh, it's fine. I understand that you've been busy and all with the move. How are you liking the new place by the beach?" "It's great. Sand and the ocean are my view every morning when I wake up," the male replied. "But I do have some good news though. My parents are letting me fly back into town for the week to see you, Tucker and Danny." "That's great news." Danielle's grin was almost from ear to ear and a small blush dusted her cheeks. "I can't wait to see you." "I can't wait to see you either. I miss getting to see you." Danielle could almost hear the smile on the other end of the phone. She figured it wasn't a big one like hers, but damn it, a small one was better than nothing. "So," Danielle began to trail off on her words. "So," the male replied. Danielle sighed. "So there's this dance coming up. The next day, with Danny." Danny yawned slightly as he listened to his teacher, Mr. Lancer, drone on and on about some sort of subject he was teaching. Danny didn't really consider it much important at the moment. He was too exhausted to really care. And what might be the reason for his exhaustion? Well, ever since Danny had woken up from his coma, Sasuke had been giving him lessons and drills on training in the shinobi arts. He had wondered if he should tell his parents about what was going on, but he quickly shot that idea down when Sasuke told him not to. His parents might get the crazy idea that he was possessed by some ghost or going insane. Then again, he had the spirit of an old shinobi dwelling within him and teaching him techniques that were impossible for regular people. Yeah, it was definitely a better option to not let his parents in on his secret training routine. Every day after school or when Danny got free time, he would go off into the woods on the outskirts of Amity and practice with his chakra. So far he hasn't learned any cool jutsu. The only thing Sasuke had been teaching him was the history of shinobi and chakra control exercises. Danny questioned Sasuke about the history. Sasuke explained it was a good idea to know your origins and where they stem from. To take pride in the generations before you or something like that. Amy. Danny heard Sasuke groan from within his mind. This place is just as boring as the academy. At least there we learn to develop our shinobi skills. Well, not here. Danny thought back to the Uchiha. We get the wonderful opportunity to learn about math, chemistry and other wonderful subjects. Sasuke smirked slightly. The kid was a sarcastic ass. He could respect it, when it wasn't directed at him, of course. When it was directed at him, he made sure to punish Danny with either a massive migraine or amp up his training. The rest of school was uneventful. He had finished up Mr. Lancer's class, done all his schoolwork, and even somehow managed to avoid picking a fight with Dash. Not like he minded anyway. The meathead always had it coming to him. Danny walked out of the school to CKER with a frown on his face and a depressing sort of aura shrouding him. Danielle, on the other hand, looked like she was trying not to laugh at her best friend. "What did I miss?" Danny asked. Danielle stopped her giggling. "Poor Tucker here just got rejected for the dance." "Again," Danielle said. "There's a dance." Danny was surprised that he didn't know about this dance. Then again, he rarely paid attention to the little things Casper High offered. It just never appealed to him. "Of course, brother. They announced it like 2 weeks ago." "Well, you must forgive me if I don't seem that too concerned about a dance. Considering my recent awakening from a coma," Danny said simply, noticing the slight flinch Danielle made. He guessed that she blamed herself for the accident that caused him to go in that coma. Danny didn't blame her. Hell, he loved his little sister, and because of it he was able to meet Sasuke. A blessing in disguise, one could say. Suddenly the frantic shouting of male students caught their attention. "Paulina, will you go to the dance with me?" One male shouted. "Paulina, will you be my girlfriend?" Another male voice asked. "No, Paulina is mine." Ah yes, Paulina was the most popular girl in all of Casper High School. She was a Latina with flawless skin and beautiful hair. She dressed in a pink t-shirt with blue jeans. She was a cheerleader and the most wanted female in the school. Danielle snorted with a huff. "Paulina, sheesh, I don't get what the big deal is. She's a dime a dozen." Both Fentons watched as Tucker suddenly began to furiously dig through his pockets. "Danny, do you have a dime I could borrow from you?" Tucker asked with a smile. Danny snorted at his friend's joke. It was cheesy, but the Fenton male would give him credit. If there was anything Danny liked, it was a witty pun. Danielle, on the other hand, just rolled her eyes. "Very funny, Tucker." "Hey dude," Tucker said while looking towards his best friend. "Why don't you ask her out to the dance?" "As if. Why would I want to take Paulina of all people to the dance? She's a total bitch." In another life, Danny Fenton would have been head over heels for Paulina. But this isn't that life. Danny Ed to have a bit of a crush on Paulina before he found out that she and her best friend had been trying to bully his sister. That instantly killed the feelings he had for the cheerleader. Paulina had tried to flirt with Danny on more than one occasion. She found it attractive when he stood up to Dash and the other bullies of the school, and Danny wasn't bad in the looks department. But with every attempt, Danny shut her down. The girl was persistent though, he'd give her that. The old saying ran true though, "Speak of the devil and the devil shall appear." Paulina approached the three. "Hello Danny," she said with a smile. Usually this smile would melt the hearts of other men. But then again, Danny wasn't like other men. "Paulina," Danny said curtly. His sister and Tucker watched the interaction between the two intently, to see what would happen. "I'm glad to see you're out of the hospital. How are you feeling?" Paulina asked. "I appreciate that, and as for how I'm feeling, getting right back into school probably wasn't my best idea," Danny said before he sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "But we both know you didn't come over here to make small talk, Paulina." "Very clever of you, Fenton," Paulina said. Smirk still in place. "What do you want?" "For you to go with me to the upcoming dance," Paulina said. The way she said it though made it sound like Danny should feel honored or something by her request. "I'm sorry, but I'd like to take a rain check on that." With those very words, it caused the smile on Paulina's face to vanish. "Why so?" "Because I have better things to do." "Really now?" Paulina asked skeptically. "Yes. Do you have a girlfriend you need to see?" "No," Danny replied, getting a bit annoyed that he was being practically interrogated by Paulina. Meanwhile, on the inside, Sasuke found the situation to be amusing. While Danny didn't have as many fangirls as he did in his time, Danny understood his suffering a bit. "A boyfriend?" Paulina asked with a raised eyebrow. "I don't swing that way, Paulina," Danny said, his voice laced with irritation. "Then why won't you go to the dance with me?" "Because I don't fucking like you," Danny screamed at her before turning his back to the cheerleader. "And again, like I said, I have more important things to do." With that, Danny began to make his way home with Danielle and Tucker following right along. It was true, Danny did have other thing going on. He just failed to mention it was more vigorous training from Sasuke. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX He was ready to see what the ancient shinobi within had to teach him today. Currently right now Danny was standing on top of a beautiful lake, practicing a chakra control exercise known as water walking. Never in Danny's wildest dreams did he believe he would ever walk on water. Yet here he was, his feet firmly planted on the watery surface as if it was like a regular ground. Surrounding Danny was a forest. This place was well concealed and outside the limits of Amity Park. Total privacy. So what's the plan for today, Sasuke-sensei? Danny asked the ancient being. Well, brat, I was thinking. I've had you work on chakra control for the last few weeks now. And I can tell you've been getting bored with the chakra control and history lessons, Sasuke said in. Danny could almost feel the smirk on his teacher's face. Don't get me wrong, Sasuke-sensei. using my chakra to stick leaves to my body, walking on trees and even water. It's been an awesome experience. But with all the cool stuff you've told me chakra can do, I'd just really like to try it myself. Danny said. He didn't want to sound unappreciative towards his sensei. He heard Sasuke chuckle from within his mind. Trust me, Danny, I know almost better than anybody the drive to improve. The desire to learn new techniques as fast as possible. I will admit though I'm a bit thankful you're not as arrogant as I was in my youth. Otherwise I probably wouldn't be training you, Sasuke replied back. How Kakashi-sensei ever put up with him back when he was going through his revenge phase is beyond him. So what techniques will you be teaching me? I've actually thought of 4 techniques that I'm going to teach you. 4 techniques. Danny thought back in surprise. He was expecting one but to hear he was actually going to receive 4 techniques. He was excited. Sasuke shook his head. The first 3 techniques were the ones you needed to know in order to graduate the academy. Yet since this era knew nothing of chakra, Danny was still probably going to find these techniques pretty cool. Alright, the techniques you'll be learning is the Kawarimi Jutsu, Bunshin Jutsu, Transformation Jutsu, and the final one is the most important. At least I see it that way. The final jutsu is a trademark of the Uchiha clan, the Gokaku Jutsu, or in your language, the Great Fireball Technique. Sasuke replied. Danny whistled slightly in amazement and his hands shook slightly with anticipation. After all those little chakra control exercises, it was time now to finally start learning some cool techniques. Alright, cool. So how do I perform these jutsu? Danny wondered. Well, unlike me usually telling you how to do things, like I regularly would when it came to you practicing chakra control, I'll send the information on how to execute the hand signs to your brain. You just need to have your body do the rest, Gaki. Inside Danny's mind, Sasuke flared his chakra a bit and sent the flux of information to his descendant. On the outside though, Danny stumbled a bit and clutched his head as the surge of information hit him. From the way Danny bit back some colorful choice words, it seemed the process wasn't the most gentle of ways. You didn't say it would cause such a migraine, Danny said as the pain in his cranium started to fade. Though on the bright side, he now knew how to execute the hand signs for each technique. You never asked, asshole, Danny muttered before silencing the connection between sensei and student. He needed complete focus if he was going to execute these techniques correctly. Within moments, his hands started moving rapidly and performing signs that he hadn't known how to do minutes ago. Later that evening, all 3 Fenton children were at the dinner table while their parents were unsurprisingly absent. Danny guessed that they were downstairs working on some ghost-related invention. Danielle was too busy brooding about her lil run-in with Paulina today to really care. The popular girl purposely bumped into her and knocked her on the ground. The female Halfa figured it was in a way payback for her brother rejecting her shallow self. Then Yulina had taken a necklace that had seemingly fallen from her bag. Danielle wasn't one for jewelry, but that damn thing looked real familiar. Jazz was sitting at the dinner table, her favorite psychology book in hand. Her task was focusing on the book itself and maybe choosing the college she'd like to attend one day. The front door of the Fenton household flew open and all 3 heard their parents enter the room in what seemed to be in excited haste. Kids, we have great news, their mother said with a smile. Really now? Danny asked. He put the sandwich he had been eating back on his plate before looking at his parents. And what's the big news? Not another Fenton kid coming, right? No, Danny boy, the Fenton baby maker hasn't been put to use as of late, Jack said, while sending subtle glances towards Maddie. Before Maddie could respond, Jazz decided to speak up. As nauseating as that sentence was, Dad, I'm more curious about the news. All 3 Fenton children looked at their mom. We're chaperoning your school dance, Maddie said with a smile. Her smile faded a bit because she hadn't received the reaction she had been expecting. Both Jazz and Danielle looked mortified. Why? Danny didn't seem to care in the slightest. No. Jazz was the first one to say something. Not going to happen, Danielle replied, not wanting to think about the tragedy that would befall her already low reputation at Casper High if her parents chaperoned the dance. Your teacher was the one who offered us the position, honey, what was his name? Jack asked. Mr. Lancer, sweetie. Ah yes, Mr. Lancer was the one who asked us to be chaperones for the dance. He also mentioned something about getting to see the rest of the Fenton family, Jack said. It didn't take a genius to figure out what that meant. Danny and Danielle knew that Mr. Lancer, while their favorite teacher, was strict on them. Danielle had no doubt he had their best intentions in mind. But actually having Mr. Lancer and her parents in the same room, well, it was a frightening thought. Maddie suddenly turned towards her eldest son. So who are you taking to the dance, honey? Danny snorted while crossing his arms over his chest. Nobody, because I'm not going. Quote, oh yes you are. No, honey, you need to socialize and get out more. Most of the time after school you just run off somewhere. Maddie said, I do get out, Mom. I mean be with people your own age. Quote, I've got Tucker as my friend and Mrs. Know it all over there. He said that last part while pointing at Jazz. His older sister rolled her eyes at him and stuck her tongue out in a childish manner. Danny chuckled slightly. You're going and that's final, Maddie said with all the parental authority she could muster. Danny gritted his teeth but knew better than to argue with his mom. Yes, they'd had their clashes in the past, but his mother always seemed to win somehow. And he could have sworn in the back of his mind he heard Sasuke laughing at him. Maddie SMI. Led at seeing her son back down and planted a kiss on his forehead. She then turned to Danielle. So who are you going with, sweetie? Maddie asked. She ignored the grumbling of Jack about how his precious baby shouldn't be taking a boy. Nobody, Mom. Danielle asked, though Jazz was the one to notice the faint blush on her sister's cheeks and the way she seemed to want to avoid this conversation. Liar, Jazz said with a smirk. Your mouth says one thing, but your body language is telling a whole different story. Who is it, Danielle? Jack asked sternly, wondering who he'd have to threaten if he hurt his baby girl. Danielle muttered the reply. Who, sweetie? Speak up please, Maddie said. It's Gara. Okay, Danielle said while Jazz's smirk grew as if she knew the answer. Suddenly Danny felt nauseous and stumbled a bit. Small beads of sweat rolled down his forehead. Excuse me for a moment. With that, Danny took off towards his room. As soon as he reached his room, he looked in the mirror to Sasuke standing in the reflection alongside him. Who did your sister just say she's taking to the dance? Sasuke asked. His name's Gara, an old friend that we used to hang with before he moved away a few months ago. His parents came into a bit of money, so now they own some beach house by the ocean. Danny replied to his sensei. Meanwhile Sasuke was looking at his pupil. It couldn't be possible, could it? Could the former Kage of the Hidden Sand Village really have reincarnated himself? And if it was true, then why now of all times? Sasuke had to confirm a few things. Does he have red hair, kind of spiked out? Maybe black rings around his eyes and a strange tattoo above one of them as well. Walk around with a gourd? Sasuke asked. Red spiked out hair, yes. Black rings around eyes and strange tattoo above one of them. You get a yes there too, sensei. As for the gourd question, I can't say I have seen him with one, Danny replied. How do you know all that about Gara? Did you go through my memories or something? Instead of replying, Sasuke began to shake his head. Things were about to get interesting indeed. Was this the same Gara he remembered from his time, or would his reincarnation know anything about his past life? He had to find out. Danny. Yes, sensei. I think it'd be a good idea for you to go to this dance. With that being said, I've decided I'll end the chapter here. Finally got home and got this thing finished. I'll continue on with the dragon episode in the next chapter. Things aren't finished here, not by a long shot. Now I bet you're wondering when Danny might unlock the Sharingan. Let me just say it won't be until the right episode hits. And so on and so forth. Master of the Unknown. Dances and Dragons Part 2. Back with another chapter of the story. It seems like everyone is liking the story so far, which is great. I plan to keep it going for as much as I can. I already have a few ideas on where to go with this story. Anyway, enjoy the next chapter. I own nothing, of course. The next day, at the mall. I hate shopping, Danny muttered, hands stuffed in his pockets as he and his sister entered the mall. Inside his pockets, one of his hands had curled around the couple of bills that his parents had given him to help purchase the garments for the upcoming dance. Hell, he didn't even want to go. But for some reason, that his sensei didn't want to explain that is. He told him to go to the dance as well. The universe may be out to get him or something. Oh, quit complaining, brother, Danielle said with a small smile. She was actually glad that her mom had forced her brother to come to the dance. She agreed that ever since his awakening from his coma, he interacted with people a lot less than he usually did. And after school these days he would disappear to places and would only come back around dinner time. Danielle had asked once where he goes off to after school. Her only response from her brother was a poke to the head and he said he would explain some other time. Besides, it's not like the world is going to end if you go to this dance. Danny sighed. I guess you're right, and besides maybe this will keep mom off my back for a while. And maybe get yourself a girlfriend, Danielle muttered with a smile, knowing he heard that comment. Have something to say, sister? Danny asked with a raised eyebrow. Nothing. Nothing at all, brother, Danielle said before she glanced forward and seen the store they were looking for. There's the store. Let's go. With no warning, Danielle took off towards the store, leaving Danny in the dust. Danny slightly chuckled. No matter how much of a tomboy his sister could act like, she totally had a girly girl side within her. He followed after his sister and entered the store just a few moments after. It was a store that sold both prom dresses and suits. Danny internally groaned. He had never worn a suit before and he could already tell that the dance was either going to be real interesting or a pain in the ass. For someone who's been given money to buy a suit and go to a dance to have fun. You sure complain a lot, Gaki, Sasuke commented. I think we both know I'd rather be training in my jutsu than going to some dance. One that I don't even have a date to, Danny thought back to his teacher. Sasuke chuckled a bit. He could almost feel the irony in what he was about to say. You remind me a lot of myself, Danny, always pushing off everything else in order to go out and train in your abilities to become stronger. But believe it or not, I learned a valuable lesson long ago. Everyone, even you, need a day off to relax and let the body rest. As for the date thing, that's your own fault. Maybe you're right about the training thing, sensei, but the date thing is another story. I mean, who was I going to take? Sasuke didn't have an answer for that one. He knew Danny wouldn't take Paulina or any of her snobby friends to the dance, and he really didn't have that many female friends either. It really did seem like Danny didn't have a lot of potential dates for this dance. When Sasuke didn't respond, Danny snorted in what he considered a victory. That's what I thought, Danny thought before a certain question came to mind. Speaking of dates and relationships, did you ever have that special kind of woman in your life, sensei? Sasuke was silent for a moment. No, Mali, he wouldn't share this kind of information, due to the fact it brought up painful memories for the ancient Uchiha, since it was his dead wife. But it was with Danny and it's not like he would tell anybody anyway. Yes, there was, Sasuke replied, his voice above a whisper. But that very whisper echoed through Danny's mind. She was somebody I didn't deserve, Danny, and even after the countless mistakes I made in my youth, she still loved me. Sasuke smiled thinly, remembering the great times he had with his wife and daughter. Back then, nobody would have believed that the cold-hearted Uchiha Sasuke would settle down and have a family. But he did, and despite not being around much of the time and he wouldn't consider himself the greatest father, Sasuke loved his family more than anything. He could only hope they were still waiting for him on the other side. What was her name, sensei? Danny asked. That's a question that I won't answer at this time, Danny. I don't want to really bring up those old memories. It's okay. I understand, sensei, Danny thought. He felt Sasuke sever their mental connection, and the young shinobi believed that his teacher wanted to go through his memories in peace. Danny decided he might as well go back to trying to find a suit. He glanced through a wide variety of suits, from the flashy pricey ones to the ones he could actually afford. Danny truthfully didn't care what suit he wore. He wasn't doing this out of his own free will, of course. As Danny found what seemed to be the 12th suit or so, the young shinobi in training heard screaming coming from outside the store. What the hell's going on? Danny wondered while walking towards the front of the store. Meanwhile, Danielle was trying on an absolutely beautiful teal dress she had found. She looked in the mirror and couldn't help but believe she looked like a princess. She hoped a certain red-haired friend of hers thought the same too. Danielle was brought out of her fantasy when a blue wisp of air escaped her lips, causing her to gasp in recognition. She had come to dub that as her ghost sense, an ability to tell if any ghosts are near her location. And by how strong the wisp of air was, it seemed a strong ghost was near her. Sighing, Danielle changed back into her old outfit before summoning up her powers. Danielle seen the two rings come to life and surround her body before moving in opposite directions. Within seconds, Danielle had changed into her alter ego, Danielle Phantom. Danielle turned intangible and flew out of the room and towards the location her ghost sense was telling her to go. She could also hear the screaming of innocent people. Danielle had no doubt this was going to be trouble. Is that a fucking dragon? Danny couldn't believe his eyes at what he was seeing. Within Danny's mind, even Sasuke was a little interested in the events taking place on the outside. It seems so, Sasuke replied. Sasuke himself had little experience handling dragons of all beings. Closest thing was when he and his brother, Uchiha Itachi, had battled Kabuto in his sage mode. Danny watched as the massive behemoth roared and blew out streams of fire everywhere. Plants, tables and a few other items were unlucky enough to be caught within the flames' path and were set ablaze. I can't just let that thing run wild, I've got to do something. My guess now would be a good time to put what you've learned to the test. Danny's eyes widened. Are you saying what I think you're saying? Go Gaki, go and reintroduce this world to the power of chakra. Danny glanced around. He couldn't just start attacking and throwing jutsu at this thing in his civilian clothes. It didn't take long to find what he was looking for. With a grin, Danny sprinted off to the costume store, which was conveniently located only a few stores down. Danielle Phantom flew in front of the raging beast, eyes set in a stern glare. The dragon didn't back down from the ghost girl's stare, instead it sneered at Danielle. Haven't we met somewhere before? Looks like I'll be kicking your scaly hide back to the ghost zone, Danielle said. The ghost dragon decided to respond in the appropriate manner. It opened its salivating jaws and released a column of flames at Danielle. Danielle flew back quickly and twisted her body sharply in order to avoid being burnt to a crisp. Even though she managed to avoid the fire, she could still feel the heat of it as it passed her. Danielle turned back to face the dragon, only to be smacked by the creature's tail. Danielle flew through the air and crashed through the window of a local hot dog joint. Danielle groaned and brushed a weenie off her head. She was glad nobody was around to see her like this. Pushing back to her feet, Danielle took off fast back towards her opponent. Danielle ducked under a swipe from the dragon's claws and uppercut the beast. Following up her attack, Danielle hit the dragon with a heavy haymaker which sent the beast tumbling back. She flew at the dragon. Foot reared back and was prepared to knock the damn reptile out with a well-placed kick to the cranium. The dragon lashed out fast and caught the halfa by her ankle. Danielle's eyes widened while the dragon smirked viciously. The dragon hoisted Danielle up before slamming her against the floor. Danielle felt the bones in her body rattle from the impact she made on the floor. Once again hoisted up, the dragon simply chucked her through them all. This is going to hurt, Danielle muttered. That slam on the floor took more out of her than she thought. Before he could even try to stop her out of control flight, she felt two arms wrap around her. Gotcha, a muffled male voice said. Danielle noticed that her course of flight had changed completely. In fact, she was no longer flying. Danielle took a quick glance and found that whoever caught her was sticking to the side of the wall. You all right? Danielle glanced at the person who caught her. It was obviously a male by the way he talked. But he seemed to have some sort of voice changer because she didn't recognize him by the way he talked. And she definitely couldn't recognize him due to his outfit. He was wearing what looked to be a Phantom of the Opera mask, not the one where it's cracked on one side, the full one. A hood covered his hair and he looked to be wearing what seemed to be a ninja costume. Black GI, black belt. The funny looking shoe and all. Danielle shook her head when he once again repeated the question. Are you all right? The stranger asked. Yeah, I'm fine, Danielle said, oating out of his grip and right next to him. It was true, the man was indeed sticking to the surface of the wall. Her ghost sense didn't go off, so this man wasn't a supernatural entity. Good, then we might want to move out of the way. He pointed behind them. Danielle turned to see a massive column of flames headed their way. Danielle flew out of the way while the stranger leapt to safety. Danny, in his temporary disguise, couldn't keep the grin from stretching on his lips. This was going to be his first real battle, and with a dragon of all creatures. He could hardly believe this. Don't get cocky, Danny. This is your first time using chakra in a battle. Using it in a fight and in training are two different things. Sasuke said to him. Yes, sensei. Danny knew, though he didn't have a lot of options when it came to his offensive jutsu. He knew how to make his melee attacks stronger through chakra and the great fireball technique. That was pretty much it when it came to offensive. Defensive, he had the henge Kawarimi jutsu for quick escapes and the bunshin jutsu for distractions. Even though his options weren't vast, he was pretty sure he could win this. Channeling chakra through his legs and down to his feet, Danny sprinted off towards the dragon. Danielle blinked as the stranger who saved her almost blurred out of her line of sight towards the dragon. Whoever this was, he was fast. Danny came in fast, catching the mighty ghost dragon off guard. He leapt up and bashed the behemoth across the cheek with his fist. He had stored a bit of chakra into his fist and released it in a concentrated burst. Sasuke had told him using his attacks like that was a bit of a watered-down version of his wife's old teacher. He told him that Danny wasn't ready to learn stuff like that yet. Danny landed on the ground as the dragon actually fell on its back. Not fully expecting such strength behind Danny's attack, Danielle flew down from the air and nailed the dragon in the side, causing the ghost to skid across the tiled floor of the mall in pain. Nice hit, Danny unknowingly complimented his sister. Thanks, Danielle said, trying to study who this stranger was. Do you have a name? Danny asked. Danielle Phantom. Danny nearly choked on his reply. Well, what he believed to be a ghost girl had the same name as his sister. What a strange coincidence. Sasuke on the inside merely shook his head in disbelief. He really hoped Danny was able to connect the dots and see this was his sister with ghost powers. Then again, this kid is pretty dense. He probably didn't. Sasuke thought with a smirk. Ghost girl teams up with her older brother who happens to have chakra and both are fighting a dragon. This should be interesting. Do you have a name? Danielle asked. I do, but I prefer to keep it to myself. That's not fair. Danielle replied with a pout. You never did have to give me your name, Danny said with a smug smile. Before Danielle could reply, they both heard an infuriated roar. Both looked to see the dragon charging towards them. The dragon's tail lashed out and knocked Danielle away as if she were a common house fly. It turned towards Danny and threw its head forward. Mouth opened and saliva dripped from its fangs. Danny's eyes widened. This overgrown iguana planned to eat him. Danny quickly flew through a few hand signs. Instead of munching on flesh and bones like the dragon expected, imagine its surprise when its fangs sunk their way into metal and roasted weenies. That's right. Danny had used the Kawarimi jutsu to switch places with a hot dog cart. Danielle appeared behind the ghostly dragon and using her enhanced strength, grabbed the beast by its tail and swung it around. Danielle only made 3 swings before she let the dragon go flying. Hope you enjoy that as much as I did. Danielle muttered. Now to cook me a reptile. Danny said while landing next to Danielle. Danielle watched as the stranger's hands went through a bunch of weird hand gestures. What was he planning to do? Kanten. Gokaku Jutsu. Danielle watched as the mystery man did something she didn't expect. Something that completely blew her mind and she wouldn't forget it anytime soon. The mystery man blew out a raging fireball towards the dragon. The dragon barely had time to shield itself before the jutsu impacted its body. Both watched as the dragon was caught up in a column of orange flames. Looks like I'll need to work on getting that a bit bigger, Danny muttered. The fireball had at least been the size of a tractor tire. Sasuke had shown Danny in his mind just how gigantic he could make the technique. With a bit more time and practice, Danny will have a great grasp on this jutsu. And hopefully Sasuke will teach him a new one soon too. What was that? Danielle asked, completely amazed by what she had just witnessed. This guy, whoever he was, not only was able to stick to the wall, seemed to have abnormal strength and now could breathe fire. A fireball. Danny responded plainly. Danielle had to resist the urge to slug him in the face for that response. Before she could say anything, Both heard police sirens coming from the entrance of the mall. I'd love to stay and chat, but I'd rather not with the boys in blue. Goodbye. And with that, Danny once again pumped chakra into his legs to increase his speed. With a wave of his hand, Danny vanished in a burst of speed. Danielle cursed, but she had no time to try and chase after that guy. Turning intangible, she flew off towards the ceiling of the mall. She had hoped Danny got out of there okay. Dream sequence. Your eyes are still as they were in the past, like your revenge had been my one reason for living. I learned revenge isn't always the answer. It's not too late for you. Even if I were to return, what would be there for me? A single tear dripped from emerald-colored eyes as he stared into crimson ones. I'm sorry. End dream sequence. A male jolted awake. Sweat slowly made its way down his forehead. A dream, he told himself. That's all it had been. That's all they ever were anyway. He had been having dreams like that ever since he could remember. Old faintly remember certain things from these dreams. A village in the middle of a desert. A child whose features he couldn't exactly make out was clutching a teddy bear, the roaring of some sort of monster, and more. This one had been a new one, but the male filed it away as just another dream. The male looked into the reflection of the window to his right and seen green eyes staring back at him. Over one of his eyes was a strange marking that he considered to be a birthmark. Excuse me passengers, we will be landing in Amity Park in about half an hour. Please keep your cellular devices off and remain in your seat. Gara shook his head and rested his head against his seat. He glanced out the window of the airplane to see the town of Amity Park come into view. It looked so small from this height. Just a little while longer and he'd be able to see his old friends. Tucker, Danny, and of course, Danielle. It was good to be home. With Danny. 2 days later. Day of the dance. Danny panted. His body was aching from physical exhaustion. His hands moved and attacked invisible adversaries. Danny leapt back, his body doing a complete backflip. He landed on the surface of the lake and his hands went through a few seals. Kanten. Gokaku Jutsu. Danny blew a fireball that seared the surface of the lake. Steam rising in its wake as the jutsu passed by. Danny nodded at the fireball's size. It had gotten much bigger since he used it against that dragon. That might be due to the fact Danny preferred to spend his whole day training his techniques. I must say I'm impressed, Danny. You've done well at improving the Gokaku Jutsu. Thanks, sensei, but I don't have a lot of jutsu when it comes to offensive techniques. And truthfully I don't know how effective the jutsu will be against the dragon if it shows up again. Well, until you unlock your Keki Genkai, I can't teach you much of my offensive techniques unless they're fire-related. The other techniques require the use of the Sharingan. Can't you forcibly awaken my Sharingan? Danny asked. His sensei had some influence over the inner workings of his body. It should be a possibility, right? In theory, yes, I could awaken your Sharingan by filtering my chakra through your system and into your genes. Awakening the dormant dojutsu. Really, that'd be so awesome. Danny shouted out loud with a grin. He was the only one in the area, so it's not like anybody could hear him. But I won't, unless a situation arises in emergency to where you need the Sharingan. At his sensei's words, Danny's mood dropped like a stone. But why? Because Brad, I'm not just going to hand power to you. You'll have to earn it and unlock these eyes just like everyone in the Uchiha had. 2. Sasuke said sternly. He knew from the beginning he wasn't going to make things easy for Danny if he was serious about his shinobi training. And by him unlocking the Sharingan for him, Danny would never gain the experience it took to awaken the eyes. He needed to do it on his own. I understand, Sasuke, Danny said while walking over towards the edge of the lake and taking a seat on the shore. Will you at least give me a new jutsu to practice? It took a few moments and he could hear Sasuke humming in thought. I guess I could. Actually, I'll give you 2 more jutsu to practice. One's an offensive Kanten technique and the other jutsu can be used for offense and defense. Really, 2 more techniques? That's awesome. What are they? Just don't forget to keep practicing your basics, alright, Gaki? When Sasuke watched as his descendant nodded in agreement, he continued. The 2 techniques I will be transferring to you is the Kanten, Honsenka no Jutsu, and the Shunshin Jutsu. What are those techniques? The Honsenka Jutsu in a way is similar to the Gokaku, except instead of one big raging ball of fire, it sends out a small volley of them. That way it can almost cover a wider area of attack, and with enough practice you can conceal weapons in them. Speaking of, you need to get you some shuriken and kunai. That way we can also begin training you in how to use them properly. Shinobi never replied on jutsu and fists alone to win all their battles. Danny rolled his eyes at that comment, but he nonetheless agreed that sometime soon he should definitely purchase those items. It would be pretty badass to be able to throw kunai and shuriken with precise accuracy. He would order some online later. The other jutsu, the shunshin, is a bit more of a difficult technique. Only Junin and a selected few chunin use this technique due to the amount of chakra it consumes and the required control. The shunshin helps you move short or great distances, not exactly teleportation but a high-speed moving technique. I don't expect you to get it down today or over the course of the next week even. If the shunshin requires a lot of chakra to perform, then why are you having me do it? Danny asked. To get your body used to moving at high speeds. You won't always be fighting a slow-moving battle, Danny. You'll need your body to be able to keep up with an adversary that may be faster than you. Plus I'll be sending bits of my chakra into you, or so you don't kill yourself from chakra exhaustion. Sasuke focused and sent the information on how to perform the techniques to Danny. Danny rubbed his head, feeling the familiar migraine that came with learning these new techniques. After the migraine had faded, Danny rolled the muscles in his neck to relax and prepare his technique. Danny's hands started to go through a series of hand seals, while Sasuke channeled a bit of his own chakra into his descendant. After a moment, Danny hit the final hand seal. Shunshin no Jutsu. Danny concentrated on the direction he wanted to go. The young Ma, Le Fenton, felt his body propel at speeds he hadn't been able to travel before. The world stretched around him at the speeds he was moving at. Danny couldn't believe how quick he was moving. This is awesome. But alas, Danny's thrill with the new jutsu wouldn't last forever. Since Danny wasn't used to the immense speed of the shunshin, he was unable to stop himself from smacking into a tree. Thunk. That was the sound made as the nature giant shook as the shinobi in training collided with it. At the base of the tree, Danny laid on the ground with swirling eyes and muttering incoherently. Meanwhile, in his subconscious, Sasuke was shaking his head in amusement. Baka. Day of the dance. Danny grumbled. He absolutely hated wearing this monkey suit. He glanced over and couldn't help but smile a bit. His sister seemed to be glowing with happiness as she walked towards the gym with her dress. Danny noticed the pep in her step, eager to meet up with her date. There was one thing though that Danny was forgetting. Where's Tucker? Danny asked his sister. I'm not sure, Danielle replied. I did hear though he got Valerie to go to the dance with him. You know, after Quan dumped her for somebody else. Danielle shook her head. Those jocks were such pigs. Before Danny could answer, another voice did for him. Good for him. Both looked forward to see about a male teen with dark crimson hair followed up with emerald eyes and a strange tattoo above his eyes. He, like Danny, was dressed in a black suit as well. Danielle felt heat rise in her cheeks. Meanwhile, within Danny's mind, Sasuke seen Gaara and couldn't help but be shocked slightly. Yep, that was definitely the reincarnation of the cage. No doubt about it, but there seemed to be the absence of his gourd. Maybe the teen was unaware of his heritage. Gaara, she whispered. The usually stoic teen's lips curled upward slightly, a small indication that he was smiling. Danielle, in her high heels and all, sprinted towards Gaara, not caring how uncomfortable it was on her feet. The two teens embraced in a hug. After Danny finally caught up to them, he clasped his hand on his sister's shoulder. All right, that's enough, you two, Danny said. His sister let go of her not-so-secret crush and stood back as Danny and Gaara glanced at one another. Good to see you again, Gaara. You as well, Danny, Gaara said before his eyes narrowed. I can't understand why, but there seems to be something different about you. Really now? Danny raised an eyebrow. Yeah, Gaara replied after a few moments of silence. Maybe it's because we haven't seen one another in a while. Even though he said those words, Gaara didn't seem to convinced himself. That might be it. You know, as fun as reconnections are. The familiar voice of one Tucker Foley said. I think we all have a dance to get to. Next to Tucker, Valerie shook her head. Geek, she muttered. Everyone entered the gymnasium. Strobe lights flashed, Music was loud in every street. Udent at Casper High seemed to be having the time of their lives. Danny had broken away from the group once they had entered the gymnasium, giving the excuse that he was going to retrieve some refreshments. While in actuality, Danny had broken into the school and was currently using the library's computer to do research on the dragon. He had never seen a ghost dragon before and he had certainly no. He expected it to wear an amulet around its neck. Find anything useful? He heard Sasuke ask. One of the previous lessons Sasuke had given him was to try and collect intel on his enemy. Not saying he was expecting to run into the dragon again. But better to be safe than sorry. Maybe. Danny finished his typing and the screen of the computer flashed to an image of the same ghost dragon he had battled at the mall. Medieval ghost legend tells that the cursed amulet of Aragon can transform the wearer into the dragon under cases of extreme distress or anger. Wasn't your sister brooding over tea? Paulina had taken something from her backpack. That looked like a necklace. Oh, for Cammy's sake. Danny face-palmed himself. Paulina had the amulet and by how nice it looks in the picture, he didn't have any doubt that she was probably wearing it tonight. Any words of advice, sensei? Go back to the dance and act like everything is normal. Scope out the dance and find Paulina. If possible, retrieve the necklace from her neck. If worse comes to worse, you'll be fighting a dragon at your school dance. Alright, got it. Danny hoped he could avoid fighting the dragon at school of all places. At least he was smart enough to stash his temporary disguise on him in case he needed it. Danny returned to the gymnasium and the first thing he noticed was his parents talking with Mr. Lancer. I didn't even want to get near that possible train wreck. He hoped to find Paulina though before something enraged the girl. Meanwhile with Danielle, she was having a good time dancing with Gaara. The male Fenton had never really danced before so she was moving to the beat of the music to the best of her abilities. And thankfully her powers hadn't been acting up either. She would never be able to dive down the embarrassment if somehow she started sinking through the floor or worse. Her dress became intangible. Gaara was enjoying himself by the look of it as well. The music in the dance suddenly started slowing down and the couple seemed to inch closer to one another. Danielle felt heat rise in her cheeks once more and Gaara seemed to notice. It's all right, Danielle. I don't bite. He offered a small smile in which she returned. The two drew closer to one another and danced with the music. Danny, on the far side of the gym, couldn't help but smile at seeing how content his sister looked. After all the bullying the popular girls put her through, she deserved this moment. Look at the two freaks dancing. Speak of the devil. Danny frowned as Paulina and her friends approached Danielle and Gaara. He noticed the amulet's golden surface reflect as the lights above passed over it. I don't know how a loser like you was able to get a date like Gaara here. Paulina shook her head while her friends laughed a bit. Must be a pity date. Paulina, Danielle growled. Nobody noticed her eyes blaze a neon green. What do you want, Paulina? Gaara asked. I just came by to see if you'd like to dance with a real woman. Gaara, Paulina said with a smirk. She used her hands to gesture the curves on her body. I'm having a great time dancing with Danielle here and I think you'd best leave us alone. Gaara said. Why would you want to dance with this flat-chested bimbo? Paulina asked with a raised eyebrow. Danielle's eyes were practically smoking with rage. She wasn't flat-chested, she was at least a high B cup, damn it. As soon as Danny approached, all he seen was his sister deck Paulina with a hard right hook. Damn, serves her right, Sasuke commented with a smirk. Before Danny could respond, he and Danielle heard a low growl coming from Paulina. Both watched as her skin became a pale blue while her pupils became slits. Gaara noticed this and narrowed his eyes. What the hell? The amulet on Paulina's neck was glowing and she seemed to be morphing. You might want to take that amulet off her, Sasuke said. Before Danny could though, Paulina released a hiss and then her whole body was covered in a blue light. In seconds, an enraged dragon was sitting in the middle of the dance floor. Students began screaming and rushing towards the door. Could this get any worse? Danny asked, glancing around for a safe place to change into his disguise. Ghost. Danny heard the familiar shout of both his mom and dad. You just had to ask. Alright, finished with this chapter. The Episode of the Dragon will be finished in the next chapter and will go right away into the next episode. But I'll be adding my own twist to the next one, of course. Anyway, as you all have noticed, both Sasuke and Danny act a bit OC. Personally, I feel like I've been doing a decent job making both characters entertaining to read. Also, this reincarnated Gaara, what role will he play in the battle against the Ghost Dragon? What do you all think? I'm out. Till next time. Master of the Unknown. Final dance and moving on. Back with chapter 5 of Not Everything Has to Be Ghostly. And I'm very surprised by all the positive comments this story has received so far. Nonetheless, I will keep doing my best to provide you all with the best content I can. Anyway, just so you all know, Sam will be in this story. She's just not here yet. Have I decided to make her a future pairing for Danny? Not entirely sure about that one. But considering the plans I have for her, we shall see. Now somebody in the Revi WS asked me if I could introduce Naruto into the story. Now let me just say this, Naruto is extremely powerful. Nobody, not Pariah or even Dan Phantom, could beat Naruto at his full might. But don't fret, Naruto will make an appearance in the story. Just very far down the road, like very far. Also, I want everyone to keep in mind, this story, while it is a Naruto and Danny Phantom crossover, keep in mind, the universe is the DC one. Anyways, before I reveal too much, let's just go on with the story. I own nothing, not Naruto or Danny Phantom. Screams echoed throughout the gymnasium as students scrambled for the door, tripping and pushing one another out of the way, all in a desperate attempt to escape. Now what had everyone so terrified, I bet you're wondering. Well, sitting in the middle of the gymnasium was a massive ghostly dragon. Its mouth opened and it let out a horrifying roar. Danielle gritted her teeth as she had her arm behind her, slowly moving Gaara farther and farther away from the dragon. She couldn't transform, not here, right now. And it didn't help that her parents had to catch the damn overgrown iguana's attention by shouting at it. What surprised Danielle a bit is that while she could hear all the other students scream in fear, she hadn't heard Gaara utter a single word. She cast a quick glance back at him too. See him staring at the beast with a fixed expression. Gaara, we need to leave, my parents will hold the creature off. Danielle said, trying to convince her crush to leave. He seemed reluctant, like something inside him wanted to stay and fight the creature. But what could he do? Yeah, I guess you're right. Gaara muttered sourly before taking off towards the exit. Good, Danielle said. With Gaara out of trouble, I can now look for a place to transform. She was about to run off into the hallway before the shouting of her parents stopped her. Take this, you ectoplasmic abomination, Jack said, having pulled an ecto-pistol from somewhere in his dress suit and began firing at the beast. The dragon growled as the rounds from the ecto-pistol hit its body. The weapon was a mere prototype at the moment, so to the dragon it didn't hurt that much, just merely caused a bit of a stinging sensation. The dragon breathed a stream of fire at Jack, hoping to roast the larger man. Jack rolled out of the way as the fire passed him. A table behind him had been reduced to firewood. The dragon was about to attack Jack again when it felt something shatter against its cranium. And by the feel of it, a liquid was now making its way down its back. The dragon glanced over to see Danny glaring at it. It had been him to throw a glass of punch at the beast. You can add, trying to set my dad on fire too. The list of why I would never date your shallow self, Paulina. Danny smirked. The dragon snarled. The inner popular girl didn't like that comment one bit. I wouldn't date such a puny nerd anyway. The dragon roared, its voice a deep baritone. You've got a real manly voice there, Paulina, Danny smirked. That was the wrong thing to say apparently, as the dragon twisted sharply and lashed out with a massive kick. Pain rattled Danny's body as he went flying through the gymnasium and ended up crashing through some snack tables. Danny, Danielle shouted before glaring at the dragon. First, Paulina had to ruin her date, call her flat-chested and then hit her brother. She was going to enjoy this. Going ghost. Danielle's body became engulfed in a white flash as she transformed into Danielle Phantom. Danielle raced at the dragon, fist raised and ready to bash the creature. The dragon moved its head to the side and Danielle barreled past it. Now there's two ghosts, Maddie said. First there was a dragon ghost and now what seemed to be a teenage female ghost. And the two were battling it out. If the situation wasn't so serious, she'd be over the moon with joy. After all, this is what she and Jack had been studying for years now. But to fight the dragon and possibly the ghost team, they would need some of their bigger weapons. Thankfully, one ecto bazooka was in the trunk of the vehicle just in case of emergencies. Danielle twisted sharply, avoiding the dragon's claws that could have possibly shredded her to ribbons. She flew forward and kicked the behemoth in the face. The dragon's head snapped to the side. The beast glared at Danielle before it did something completely unexpected again. The dragon head butted Danielle. Danielle grunted at feeling the impact of such an attack. Her little body compared to even the cranium of the dragon. To Danielle it felt like a small vehicle just hit her full force. Danielle felt her body collide with the wall of the gymnasium. Ouch! She took the phrase, using your head, just a bit too seriously, Danielle muttered as she clambered back to her feet. Puny ghost geek won't ruin my night. The dragon roared and a column of fire sprang from its maw and headed towards Danielle. Her eyes widened. She wouldn't be able to dodge the attack in time, it was moving too fast. So Danielle did the only thing she could think of, she threw her hand up in an attempt to shield herself from the oncoming flames. Little did she know, Danielle was unconsciously channeling ecto energy in her hands. Her body became engulfed in the ghostly fire. The dragon smirked viciously. Its prey couldn't have survived that. As the dragon turned to leave, it stopped when it heard a familiar voice. What, I'm alive? The dragon snapped its head back towards the voice. To its surprise, shrouding the ghost girl was a shield made of ecto energy. Well, half alive that is. Danielle stopped the channeling of ecto energy and stared at her hands in wonder. She had never been able to do something like that before. Did she have more abilities that she didn't know about? Well, considering she's only had these powers for a little over a month, it wouldn't surprise her. We've got to stop meeting like this. A familiar voice caught both Danielle and the dragon's attention. They turned to see the stranger from the mall. Danny, dressed in his full disguise, had ALR. Edie landed on the last hand sign needed for his jutsu. Kanton. Hansenka no jutsu. Danny fired a volley of fireballs at the dragon. The dragon roared in pain as the Hansenka jutsu impacted its body and pushed it back. Danny had noticed the Hansenka jutsu wasn't as big as he hoped. Looks like he had a lot more practicing to do with that jutsu as well. Danny suddenly heard a strange humming behind him. Danny looked to see his mother holding a rather large weapon in her hand. Eat this, ghost freak. Maddie fired the Fenton bazooka. A vibrant green blast of ecto energy spewed from the chamber of the weapon. Danny's eyes widened behind his mask and he leapt out of the way. His own mother tried to shoot him too and take out the dragon. She was so not getting a Mother's Day card. The dragon grunted as it was actually pushed through the wall of the gymnasium. Brick and plaster of the wall gave way as the dragon was pushed to the outside and onto the nearby football field. Danielle knew she had to chase after the dragon and stop it. But leaving her mom with this super-powered stranger wasn't something she wanted to do. Danielle gritted her teeth. The dragon was the bigger priority at the moment. She just hoped this unknown wouldn't do anything to her mother. With that, Danielle flew off after the dragon. Hey, watch where you're shooting that thing. Danny complained, his fist raised in a comical manner. Both Fenton parents had their weapons pointed at Danny now. Hold it right there, spook. Jack said, his ecto pistol glowing with energy and ready to fire. Do I look like a ghost to you? Danny did a quick spin to show off his costume. Not surrounded by that ecto stuff of theirs, no tail, can't walk through walls or anything like that. But you fired a volley of fireballs from your mouth. Maddie said, her weapon still trained on the disguised teen. And no normal human can do that. Look, Danny resisted the urge to pinch the bridge of his nose in annoyance. I'd love to sit here and argue my case on how I'm not a ghost. But I need to help that ghost girl out there fight a dragon, so this is where I say my farewell. Danny's hands quickly flew through a few hand seals. Stop. Maddie and Jack both fired their weapons at Danny. Both never hearing him utter the name of his jutsu. The spot where Danny was standing exploded as the blasts from the ecto bazooka and pistol impacted, creating a small shower of dirt and broken tile parts. But once the dust cleared, it showed that Danny had vanished. "He's gone," Jack stated the obvious, looking around the destroyed gymnasium to see if the disguised teen was still around. "Who was that?" Maddie asked. The answer she got was a slight breeze of the wind that had swept through the hole in the wall made earlier by the dragon. "You don't know how long I've been wanting to do this, Paulina," Danielle said as she bashed the dragon across the cheek. The dragon stumbled back and growled in anger. Danielle flipped in the air and brought her foot down on the dragon's cranium, causing the might beast to kiss the ground. Danielle followed suit and was about to continue her assault, but the dragon's tail smacked her hard. Danielle tumbled through the air and hit the touchdown post. Danielle shook the ringing from her ears. That hurt. Danielle shook the daze off her and focused back on the dragon, only for her eyes to widen in fright. The dragon had lifted up one section of the stands above its head and was grinning at Danielle. With a mighty roar, the dragon chucked the massive football stand at her. Danielle focused on the only power that could save her at the moment, as she was too frightened to move. And thankfully, just before the stands collided with her, Danielle's body had turned intangible. The STA-NDS passed through Danielle and broke in a tangled mess of steel when it hit the ground. "This is getting out of hand, don't you think?" Danielle whipped her head to the side to see the stranger standing next to her on the touchdown post. "Who are you?" Danielle asked, completely ignoring Danny's question. "Me? Well, if I had to give you a name, just refer to me as..." Danny stopped for a moment, trying to think of a cool alias he could use. "Itachi," Danny heard his sensei say. "Itachi, isn't that the name of your older brother, sensei?" "Correct, and besides, I feel like my brother deserves a bit of a tribute. And what better way to honor him than using his name as your alias?" "Itachi," Danny finally told Danielle. "You can refer to me as Itachi." "Itachi, huh?" Danielle questioned. She had never heard of a name like that before. Before Danielle could continue the conversation, both Danielle and Danny leapt to avoid being roasted by the dragon. "I'm getting sick of this dragon," Danny said through gritted teeth. While he wanted to hurt this annoying reptile, he knew it was Paulina under there, so he couldn't exactly try and exterminate the creature. "That makes two of us," Danielle said. "I've done some research on the dragon before us. We have two options to defeat it. We could beat it until it loses consciousness, or we take off the amulet around its neck. If we choose option 2, the dragon should vanish and its human host shouldn't be harmed. I like option 1, to be honest. The host is a bit of a bitch," Danielle said while cracking her knuckles. Danny shrugged. He had no problem with either option. "Let's beat down this overgrown iguana." With that, both Fentons charged the dragon. Danny was sprinting across the field, coming in low while Danielle had taken to the sky. The dragon growled. Its chances at killing its prey looked very slim now. Danny leapt and kicked the dragon across the face. Due to a bit of chakra enhancement, the dragon flew and crashed into one of the remaining football stands. Danielle, still floating in the air, concentrated. Earlier she had unknowingly channeled her ecto energy and formed a shield to save herself. She had no doubt he could probably use the energy for offensive purposes as well. Danielle's hands were shrouded with ecto energy as she focused on her attack. Throwing her hands forward, a blast of ecto energy fired at the dragon. The dragon roared in pain as it was hit from the blast. "It's not done yet." Danielle watched as Itachi leapt into the sky, his hands going through those weird motions again. Kanton Gokaku Jutsu, the same fireball she had seen him use at the mall. This time it was surprisingly much bigger, sailed from Itachi's lips and slammed into the dragon. Danny and Danielle watched the fire caused by the jutsu burn the beast. Both could hear its agonizing roars. After a few moments, the fire died down and the roaring stopped. Once the fire was completely gone, it revealed an unconscious Paulina. Her dress had been slightly burnt, with a few holes here and there. But it was still intact, and so was her modesty. Danny reached down and snagged the amulet off her neck. Danielle watched Itachi for a moment. What was he thinking? "Here," Itachi suddenly said, handing her the amulet. Danielle was surprised. She thought he was going to take off with it. "I'm sure you can find a better place to dispose of this than I can." With that, Danny decided he may as well take his leave. The dance was obviously over and he was a bit tired. Wait, Danielle shouted, catching Itachi's attention. Thank you for your help. Glad to be of service, Miss Phantom. With that, Danny disappeared using his chakra-enhanced speed. Danielle smiled. She had little to doubt she may be working with Itachi again in the future. Danielle glanced down at the amulet. Back to the ghost zone with you. With Gaara. Gaara tossed and turned on his bed. Hours ago he had called Danielle to find out if she was okay. Gaara had offered to take Danielle out, to make up the fact that the dance got ruined by a dragon. Now we find Gaara asleep on his bed, having used some of his parents' newfound wealth to rent a hotel room. Sweat dribbled down his forehead and his eyes were closed. The young man was currently sleeping. By the way he was tossing and turning, it seemed he was having a dream. Gaara found D himself standing in some sort of massive sewer. This couldn't be right though. The last thing he remembered was falling asleep on his bed. Gaara took in his surroundings. First off, the sewer he was in was massive. At least the size of the Grand Hall or something. The sewer was dimly lighted and he could feel the water almost curling around his ankles as he began to walk. Come this way, Gaara, a voice said, quickly, for we don't have much time. Gaara didn't know why, but he felt compelled to follow the voice. He took off in a sprint. It was surprisingly easy despite the amount of water he was treading through. As he ran towards the darkness, it seemed to be moving on its own. The closer Gaara got, the farther away from him it moved. After what seemed like forever, Gaara finally decided to stop in his sprint. There was nothing here, so where did that voice come from? Am I losing my mind? Gaara muttered. No, your mind is in perfect condition actually. A voice said, this time from behind him. Gaara's eyes widened. He recognized that voice. After all, that voice sounded similar to his own. Gaara turned around to see himself staring back at him. But his copy was dressed differently than he. There was a gourd on his back and his body was covered in prestigious robes. On his hat, there was a kanji. Cage. Gaara said before shaking his head. How did he know that word? What was a cage? The other him smiled. Ah, so it seems you recognize the attire I'm wearing. I guess that's a good start. What do you mean? Who are you? Gaara asked. At the moment, that's too much to explain. I don't have a lot of time at the moment to even explain who I am or why you exist. What I can tell you, Gaara, is this: big changes are coming to Amity Park. You must be ready to help Danny when the time comes. Copy, Gaara said. What does Danny have to do with this? You annoying brat. A rather loud and high-pitched voice squealed from the darkness behind the other him. The oath. Gaara looked annoyed as a giant eye seemingly materialized from the darkness. It was a bright gold color and shaped like a star. We don't have time for this, just remember already. The voice screamed, and a huge gust of wind hit Gaara in the chest, propelling him away from whatever monster lurked behind the cage. End dream. Gaara jolted away and quickly ran to the bathroom. Flipping on the light, he stared at himself and was trying to breathe. What kind of dream was that? What did that other him mean that big changes were coming to Amity Park? Gaara splashed some cold water on his face before walking out into his bedroom. He stared at his cell phone on his desk. The phone contained info on how to contact his parents. After a bit of thinking, he decided he would give them a call. Despite how late in the evening it was. 1 week later. The last few days had definitely been crazy and full of adventure if you asked one Danielle Fenton. After the whole incident with the dragon, she was then tasked with the challenging tasks of getting her grades raised in school. If fighting ghosts on a nightly basis wasn't enough, she had gotten an AD on her last test and was forced to have to do a makeup project. She got stuck with having to do research on some gorilla at the local zoo. And that's how she met Skulker, the Ghost Zone's greatest hunter. He had tried to hunt and capture her while she was completing her school assignment. Danielle found his obsession with hunting and wanting her pelt on his wall a bit too creepy for her liking. But she was able to defeat the hunter and send him on his way back to the Ghost Zone. Danielle also hadn't seen or heard word from the enigma known as Itachi as of late. She couldn't really figure out what he was. Whenever he was around her host sense didn't go off, so that indicated that he wasn't a ghost. So what was he exactly? Was he a metahuman? like the ones she's been hearing about on the news. Or was he something completely different? All Danielle could figure out so far is he didn't seem to want to cause harm to innocent people. So she could live with that for now, but she was determined to figure out more about him. Danielle found herself walking up the stairs from the lab. The ghost portal was working efficiently and no ghost seemed to be trying to breach it. All in all, it seemed like today would be pretty smooth sailing. Imagine though Danielle's surprise when she walked into her kitchen and seen her older sister, Jazz and notorious bully, Baxter in the kitchen. Danielle said. She almost dropped the drink she was holding in shock. What are you doing here? I'm tutoring him, Jazz answered her little sister. Since he refuses to do his own homework. Homework is for wimps, said with a shrug. So Jazz, will you be coming to my party? You can have your sister over there come too if she wants. It'll be the perfect place to show the both of you why I'm the king of Casper High. King huh? Everyone heard a familiar voice ask with a chuckle. More like an inflated baboon with an ego to match. But by all means, don't let me ruin your fantasy. Everyone looked towards the stairway to see Danny Fenton standing there. Dressed in a black leather jacket, gray undershirt and his usual black jeans. Danielle and Jazz noticed his usual vibrant blue eyes that contain a bit of mischief were dull today. It's not like you'd understand royalty anyway, loser. Said back with a sneer. Since you and your loser friends are at the bottom of the chain at Casper High. You forget this loser can put you on your ass though. Danny said. A rather cruel smirk found its way on his face. Before Danny had chakra, he could always take on in a confrontation. Now he could absolutely destroy the meathead if he so desired. Within his subconscious, Sasuke was wondering why his descendant seemed to be in a rather foul mood today. Before could retort, Jazz beat him to the punch. What's got you in such a foul mood today, Danny? Check the calendar and you tell me. Both Danielle and Jazz looked towards the calendar and their eyes widened. It was that day today. No wonder their brother seemed to be in a foul mood. What day is it? Asked, not understanding what the big deal was. It's that day, Baxter. Danny's voice had dropped to a whisper. Was confused for a moment before his eyes filled with recognition. He remembered that tone of voice. He remembered a few years back, he had insulted Danny on this day and had received a rather nasty beating from the male Fenton. But even through his thick skull, he understood he deserved it. Today was a day that meant a lot to Danny. Hey man. Look, I forgot. Started to say but was interrupted when Danny placed his hand up. It's all right. I didn't expect you to remember Baxter. A lot of people at our school have forgotten. Danny said before making his way towards the front door of the house. You going to pick out flowers? Jazz asked. Yeah, can you pick 2 out, one from Jazz and me? Danielle asked her brother. No problem. With those words, Danny departed out the door. The three were quiet, not really knowing what to do or say now. Danielle felt sad though. It was a day of grieving for her older brother and she had no way of helping shoulder some of his pain. The silence was broken by the sound of her father calling from the basement. Danielle, are you here, sweetie? Jack asked from the lab. Yeah, Dad. Come down here, I've got something I want to show you. Danielle complied to her father's wishes and began making her way down the basement steps. She entered the lab and found her father holding what looked to be a vacuum cleaner. What's that, father? This is my latest invention in the field of ghost hunting technology. Jack said rather proudly while showing off his invention. The ghost weasel, it collects ambient ghost energy and fires it right back into the ghost zone. Danielle decided to ask the million-dollar question. Does this invention work, Dad? Jack gave his daughter a rather arrogant smile. Now why wouldn't it? I invented it after all. With that, her father pressed the on button on the machine. Danielle ducked for cover as everything within the lab was sucked towards the ghost weasel. The Fenton thermos ended up clogging the device. Jack pulled on it, but no matter how hard he pulled, it wouldn't come out of the device. Looks like I'll need to retrieve the Fenton unclogger. With that, her father disappeared, off on his journey to find it. Danielle took a closer look at the ghost weasel. You know, Dad, you could have just pressed. Danielle pressed the button and the Fenton thermos fired out of the ghost weasel. But, as fate seemed to enjoy messing with her, it hit the on button on the ghost portal. The reverse button. From out of the portal, an unknown ghost emerged from the portal. The ghost had a white mullet, dark shades on its eyes, and was wearing a lab coat. The ghost was laughing like a maniac. "Child, you have freed me from the ghost zone. I am Technus, ghostly master of science and electrical technology." Danielle's eyes narrowed and she summoned up her ghost powers. In a flash, she transformed. "I don't think so, buddy. I refuse to let you use the technology in this lab to take over the world." Technus's eyes widened in realization before a grin stretched on his face. "That's a great idea, child. You should consider tutoring." "Damn it," Danielle muttered. Then the battle between the two had begun. With Danny felt the wind caress his face as he leaned against a hard surface. In his hand, Danny held a few flowers. "I can't believe it's already been over 8 years since that day." Danny spoke. "Some days I wake up and wish it was a dream. That none of it was real." The wind swept a few fallen leaves and carried them away. Who or whatever he was speaking to didn't retort to Danny's statement. "My life has been a wild ride as of late. Would you believe I'm the descendant of a powerful shinobi from a forgotten era?" Danny chuckled. He looked down at his free hand and clutched it into a fist. "I have this power, and I feel like I can do great things with it." Silence was still greeted Danny. "I hope you're proud of me and who I've become over the years. I miss you and hope I can see you again someday. Rest easy now." With those final words being said, Danny placed the flowers down and wiped a stray tear away. Danny began making his way out of the area. The place Danny had been in was the local cemetery of Amity Park, and he had placed a full bouquet of flowers on a grave. There was a name engraved on that tombstone that Danny would never forget. Sam Manson. Gone but will never be forgotten. I think that's where I'll end this chapter. So Gaara didn't have a big part in the fight with the dragon, obviously. I kinda did that on purpose. But don't worry everyone, as you can tell he will soon be playing a major role in the story soon enough. And fought. Sam is dead. What happened? What could be the cause of such a tragedy? But here's a question to keep everyone on their toes. Do the dead ever truly stay dead? Keep in mind I did mention she will have an important role in the story. But what role could a dead character be helpful with? Well, read and find out. Till next time. Master of the Unknown. Mechanical Issues and Genies. Well, you all know what time it is. It's time for the next installment of Not Everything Has to Be Ghostly. Thanks to everyone that has reviewed the story so far. I appreciate all the positive comments the story has been receiving so far. And as always, I will do my best to provide the best content I can for my readers. Also, Sam's death and how she will be playing a role in the story will be discovered a bit later on in the story. I see some reviewers say she's going to appear as a ghost. It's a possibility. I will admit now though, there will be a chapter in the future dedicated to what happened to her in the history between Sam and Danny. Let's get on with the story. XXXXXXXXUSUSUSUSUSUSUSDPDPDPDPDPDPDPXXX. Chakra swirled around Danny's body as he stood on top of the lake. Sasuke had decided he wanted to take Danny's training in a new direction. He had been teaching him nothing but jutsu as of late. In the shinobi era, it wasn't the shinobi he had the best or flashy jutsu that won the fight. Sasuke had told him that he needed to add more to his arsenal than just jutsu itself. So today, instead of adding a jutsu to his list, Sasuke had decided he would train his descendant in the area of taijutsu. Danny at first had questioned how such a thing was possible since Sasuke was a living spirit within his body. Sasuke said he had a solution for that problem. Danny had his fingers in a T shape as his chakra levels rose higher and higher. Sasuke was providing him with a bit of assistance since Danny himself couldn't perform this technique on his own. "Get ready, Gaki," Danny heard Sasuke say from within his subconscious. "Got it, sensei," Danny said through gritted teeth. His body not used to the overwhelming amount of chakra that was literally pouring out of it. Danny focused on the image of his sensei. Kage Bunshin. Instead of the usual smoke that accompanied the completion of the Kage Bunshin, in its place was a column of fire. The fire swirled higher than Danny himself before it vanished. Standing where the fire had once been present was Uchiha Sasuke himself. "I can see you like to make a dramatic entrance, sensei," Danny said with a chuckle. Sasuke's lips twisted upward into a small smile. I figured I'd make my grand reappearance into the outside world one to remember. Brat. Sasuke glanced around him. It had been so long since he had been on this plane of existence. Thousands upon thousands of years to be exact. Sure, he had seen it through his descendants' eyes, but to actually experience it once again was completely different. Sasuke flexed his fingers and a frown took the place where his smile had been. This wasn't his body though. Sure, it had his chakra powering it and it took on his appearance. It wasn't his, just the body of a cage bunshin. So what taijutsu will you be teaching me? Danny asked. Growing up, his mother had taught him a bit of hand-to-hand combat. That's why he's able to defend himself against bullies like Dash or any other idiot that tried to pick on him or his sibling. The Uchiha and Scepter Fist, it's the taijutsu that all Uchiha learn. In a way it's like a rite of passage, just like the Great Fireball technique. Sasuke rolled his neck, loosening the muscles inside. Now come hit me. Come hit you, sensei. Danny asked. Yes, I need to see where your stamina is at and how long you will hold up in a fight. Once I see the results, I will adjust the errors from there. All right, here I come. Danny rushed forward, chakra enhancing his speed. He had hoped to catch his sensei off guard with this one. But for that moment he had forgotten Sasuke was an ancient shinobi with more years of fighting experience. Sasuke simply sidestepped his descendant, the speed he had been traveling. It wasn't anything he couldn't keep up with. Danny stopped his charge and twisted sharply, before rushing back towards Sasuke. Sasuke twisted and dodged as his pupil attacked him with a flurry of punches and kicks. Sasuke stared at Danny with boredom, which infuriated Danny. Take this seriously. Danny lashed out with a punch which his sensei caught. Sasuke pushed Danny's fist to the side and spun around, driving his elbow into the side of Danny's face. Sasuke grabbed Danny by the head and introduced his face to his knee. And with a front kick, Danny was sent flying across the lake's surface. Sasuke watched as Danny had lost focus of his chakra and sank beneath the surface of the lake. A moment later, the surface of the lake exploded as Danny jumped from its depths and landed on top of it. Danny rubbed his jaw in pain. His sensei hit hard. Is that all you have? Sasuke asked with a smirk. In your dreams. This time both shinobi rushed the other. Both Danny and Sasuke clashed in a flurry of punches and kicks. Danny used his knee to block a kick from his ancestor and lashed out with a punch. Sasuke seen the attack coming and used his forearm to block it. Danny dropped low and tried to sweep Sasuke off his feet. Sasuke leapt over the attack and did a backflip in midair. Danny quickly followed after, leaping in the air and brought his foot down in a vicious axe kick. Sasuke vanished from sight. Danny landed in a crouch and looked around for his sensei. Danny's ears picked up the sound of movement and he quickly threw his hands up in an X formation, effectively blocking his sensei's next attack. Good. You reacted almost instinctively, Sasuke said. He had allowed Danny to hear his movements. He wanted to see if his descendant was using more than just his eyes in this battle. You had to rely on more than just sight in a battle. The five senses had to be utilized. As if I would be taken down so easy, Danny said with a friendly smirk. He didn't expect Sasuke to spin on his heel so quickly and kick him in the side of the face. Don't get cocky, brat, you bastard. With that being said, Danny once again charged his ancestor. It was going to be a long day of training. With Danielle, the front of the Fenton household was packed with people. Danielle decided she might as well try to earn some extra cash. More specifically, she wanted an excuse to go out with a certain redhead. And what better way to make a little extra cash than have a garage sale and sell all her father's old junk? Since her brother was notably absent today, she decided to enlist the help of her longtime friend, Tucker Foley. And by help, it meant that Tucker was sitting around while Danielle did all the work. Danielle waved off another customer before she seen a familiar face. Mr. Lancer, what are you doing here? Danielle asked her teacher. I was just in the neighborhood and I noticed the garage sale you were having. So I decided to swing by, as you young folk call it. Mr. Lancer said while putting quotes around two words swing by. Danielle resisted the urge to cringe. Mr. Lancer was a great teacher. But he had a bad habit at trying to keep up with the lingo of today's youth. Mr. Lancer picked up a device and inspected it curiously. That's a good vacuum motor you have right there, Mr. Lancer. Used only once and being sold for $10. Mr. Lancer seemed interested in the motor. Looks to be in great condition. I think this would go perfectly with my hair hornet. Hair hornet, Tucker said, overhearing the conversation. Isn't that the crazy hair trimmer and shaver they sell on TV? Don't you need hair for that? Mr. Lancer narrowed his eyes. He didn't appreciate the blatant comment that his student made towards him. Very funny, Mr. Foley. I'll remember that one on Monday when I'm grading tests. With those final words, a grinning Mr. Lancer left the garage sale and had Tucker in comical tears. Business, good sister. Danielle turned to see her other had seemingly appeared from nowhere. Danielle also took notice how Danny had a few scruff marks on his face and his lip looked to swell a bit. What happened to you, Danny? Danielle asked. Oh, these. Danny pointed to the injuries on his face. Oh, just a few of the jocks decided to run their mouths and we all got into a little scrap. All in all, it was a good day. A very convincing lie and on the spot too. Again, I must admit I'm impressed. Since I haven't even begun training you in the art of deception. Danny chose not to respond to his sensei, though he was curious to what training the art of deception would have in store for him. You should be more careful, Danny, you're not invulnerable. Danielle said softly. Did you go and visit Sam? You know I did. She'd be proud of he man you've become and will grow into Danny. I hope you know that. Danielle's comment hit a sensitive spot within Danny. He was touched by his sister's words and hoped she was right. I appreciate that. Danny looked over to see Tucker pouting on his lawn chair. And what's wrong with our favorite tech genius over there? Danielle giggled. He decided it was a brilliant idea to comment on Mr. Lancer's hair situation. Ouch. Danny chuckled. While Mr. Lancer couldn't do anything physically to harm Tucker, he had no doubt Tucker's grades may take a massive drop. Danny glanced at the garage sale and noticed a few plates of steel. His parents tended to leave extra pieces of scrap around when they were finished building certain inventions. You could always take the steel and start melding it into some usable weapons. That steel is pathetic compared to the metals we used back in my time, but for now it will be efficient. Sasuke said, Hey sis, I'll be taking these steel plates off your hands. Before his sister could protest. They were already in his hands and he was making his way towards the front door. If you need me, I'll be in the lab. Why do you need the plates? Danielle called after her brother. School project, he replied, and with that, her brother had vanished into the front door of their home. Danielle could only wonder what project and what class such material like that was required. She shook her head and continued on with the garage sale. Danielle noticed Dash was looking at some computer software. And thus a devious plan came into mind on how to scam the bully out of some cash. Later that night, Danny came up from the lab and wiped the sweat from his brow. Sasuke had given him the mental picture and design how to craft proper kunai. Danny had no experience in the art of crafting weapons, so he was just going by the step-by-step instructions the ancient shinobi was telling him. Currently at the moment, the kunai were cooling down in the lab. If his parents somehow stumbled upon them, he hoped they wouldn't ask too many questions. Danny's ears picked up the sound of his older sister screaming in fright and the slamming of the fridge door. Great leftovers, Jazz muttered distastefully. Mutated hot dogs, Danny asked. Yup, code red. Both Fenton children heard the shouting of their father. Jack burst into the kitchen and was sweating in what appeared to be anxiety. I don't want any part of this, Jazz said while exiting the kitchen. Somebody raided the shed of all our stuff while we were busy today. Jack grabbed his son by the shoulders. Danny, did you see anything? Danny carefully removed his father's hands from his shoulders. Can't say I have, father. Do let me know if you find the stuff though. I'm going out for a walk. Great idea, son. In the meantime, I will have the lab secured. Jack opened the fridge and planted his feet firmly. Cover me, boys. A small chain of growling hot dogs shot from the fridge and wrapped themselves around Jack's much larger frame. Danny only gave his father a strange look and walked out into the night. Besides the mutation of hot dogs in his house, there had been a lack of ghostly activity going on in Amity Park. Maybe tonight would be a good night for a patrol. With Danielle. Danielle groaned, resisting the urge to rub her temple in frustration at the sight before her. The night had gone surprisingly well for the most part. She had raised enough money and was on her way to surprise Gara. Only to be interrupted by the sight of glowing household appliances. She had followed Hem to the source and found out the cause. The cause being a ghost she had really hoped not to deal with again. Iamtechnus, Master of Science and Technology. Her ghostly foe was a giant mechanical monster at the moment. His body made up of every kind of electrical appliance you could think of. And you're about to get your ghostly behind kicked. How I wish Itachi was here for backup. Daniel, La muttered before reaching into her pocket. If there was one person who was a genius in technology, it was Tucker. Maybe he could help find a way to beat this mechanical buffoon. Before she could retrieve her phone, a giant metal fist collided with Danielle. The half-ghost was sent flying and crashed into the side of a building. That's what I get for letting my guard down. Danielle growled before getting back into the fight. Danielle raced forward and hit Technus with a hard right. The giant didn't seem fazed by her actions. Danielle avoided Technus reaching out to grab her with his massive hands. She went low and started to unleash a barrage of strikes at Technus's exposed midsection. A mechanical claw shot from Technus's chest and wrapped around Danielle. The Halpha barely gave out a scream before she was pulled into the washer on Technus's chest. The ghostly master of technology grinned before activating the washer. Danielle screamed as she was given a rather nasty spin cycle before being harshly projected towards the ground. Who's your daddy? Technus boasted. Danielle decided not to even dignify that with a response. Danielle growled, concentrating a bit of ecto-energy within her hands. She still didn't have a lot of practice with this attack, but Technus was pissing her off. Danielle turned around and fired a rather strong ecto-blast. Technus barely had time to blink before he took the blast head-on. Technus roared in pain while clutching his face. Computer screen. Danielle's other hand flared with the same energy and she hit him again with another blast. Technus stumbled back. Danielle once again took to the skies and focused on her supernatural strength. Danielle bashed Technus with a kick and the mechanical beast crashed into a building, causing a bunch of rubble to crash down on top of her ghostly foe. Danielle breathed a bit, ignoring the sweat that dripped from her brow. She decided she would have to do some training with that ecto-blast of hers, as it seemed to still take a bit out of her. You wench, Technus shouted while emerging from the rubble, an angry scowl on his computerized face. Let's see how you like it. The washer in Technus' chest began to spin violently and emit a vibrant green glow. Danielle gulped. If she took that attack head-on she would be toast. I don't think so. A familiar voice shouted in the night. Kanton. Ruka no Jutsu. A stream of fire pierced the darkness of the night and collided with Technus. Technus roared as he was attacked by the fire. The energy that had been building up in his chest had disappeared as he tried to shield himself from the jutsu. Itachi leapt from the building and landed next to Danielle. Thank goodness you've arrived, Danielle muttered with a smile, watching as Technus continued to try and put out the fires that were burning at the technology on his body. Well, I couldn't let this overgrown calculator wannabe turn you into ash now, could I? Danny asked, his voice disguised by the changer in his costume. Overgrown calculator? Really, Danny? Sasuke asked. That had to have been the worst thing of witty banter he had ever heard. Hey, it was an on-the-spot kind of thing. It was all I had. Danny complained. Technus flared a bit of his ecto-energy which dispersed the rest of the flames on his body. Talk about a hot mess. Technus muttered to himself before his mechanical gaze landed on Itachi. He had encountered plenty of ghosts in his time that could use fire. But never had he encountered a human that could produce flames. Sure, he had heard of the humans that now roamed different parts of the earth, but he had yet to encounter one. Technus scanned Itachi's frame and his mechanical eyes were trying to find the source of his power. If it was a strange mutation or something, he would find out and he would find a way to combat it. Imagine Technus's surprise when he seen energy spreading all throughout Itachi's body, at each and every point. It can't be, Technus muttered. He was the ghostly master of science and technology. He had done plenty of research during his time in the Ghost Zone and he had seen something like this described in an old book he found. He had to be sure. You, Technis pointed at Danny. Me, Danny asked, confused at the surprised tone in Technis's voice. My eyes have scanned your body. Technis ignored the creeped out looks from the two, trying to see how your body generates that fire you just used. And behold, I found out your whole body is filled to the brim with energy. I've read about this kind of thing in an old tomo. Looks like he may know your little secret, Danny. What are you going to do about it? Sasuke asked. Is this energy perhaps called chakra? Technis finished his question, only for Danny to appear before him. You talk too much. His hands rapidly went through some hand seals. Kanton. Gokaku no Jutsu. A massive fireball consumed the upper half of Technis's body. The ghostly Master of Technology screamed in agony as the fire ate away at him once more. Danielle watched in surprise at Itachi's actions. That question seemed to have set him off for some reason. What was chakra though? Danny landed beside Danielle. You got anything to beat him with? Yeah, I may have something. Danielle searched her person to find the Fenton thermos, only to find it missing. Of all times, I must have left it at forgetting something. Danielle turned to see Tucker standing a few feet away from them, Fenton thermos in hand. Tucker tossed the thermos to Danielle. Tucker, what are you doing here? Danielle asked, surprised that her best friend was there. Well, when you notice a lot of glowing green technology flying through the air and you not picking up your phone, I figured you may need my help. Tucker said with a smile. Thanks, Tucker. All three heard a groan and turned to see Technis back in his regular form. The technology that had been making up his previous body was too burnt to be operable anymore. Scorch marks were on the ghost's skin and he was groaning in pain. Say good night, Technis, Danielle said while pressing the button on the thermos. A bright beam escaped from within the thermos and shrouded Technis, who was too weak to resist the pull. Before he was pulled into the Fenton thermos, he had a few parting words for Danielle. Be wary of your friend Ghost Child. Shinobi are beings that can't be trusted. With those final words, Technis disappeared within the thermos. Shinobi. Tucker gained a confused look on his face. What is that, Itachi? What did he mean by? Danielle turned towards her masked companion, only to find that he had vanished without a trace. With Danny. I can't believe he knew what chakra was. Danny said, while leaping from building to building. Danny didn't want to stay around and answer any questions that his ghostly partner may have had. He also couldn't believe Tucker was the one that helped save the day. Oh, what a night it had been. It surprises me as well. But who knows how old the Ghost Zone actually is. As far as I'm aware, the Ghost Zone may have been around even during my era. Sasuke said from within his descendant. Next time, Danielle might have some questions for me. I'll have to be on my toes, sensei. You still haven't figured it out yet, have you? Figured what out? Danny heard Sasuke sigh in what seemed to be disappointment. And he could have sworn he muttered something about him being just as dense as the blonde baka. I'll be blunt about it then. Your sister, Danielle Fenton, is your ghostly partner. She's Danielle Phantom. Danny hacked out a gasp and almost missed his next leap. Danny stumbled as he landed on the next building and came to a halt. What? Are you sure, sensei? The last names should have been a giveaway, you baka. Danny groaned as he heard Sasuke shout in his head. Besides, the two looked completely similar with their body structure, hair and face. He only difference is her ghostly form is the awful-looking jumpsuit and she had snow-white hair and glowing green eyes. Danny resisted the urge to face palm for not realizing it sooner. I'm such an idiot. With that, Danny continued on his journey home. That was enough excitement for him tonight. A few days had gone by and we now find the Fenton brother and sister duo along with Tucker and Gaara at the local fair. Danielle was mostly spending her time with Gaara looking at CDs and Danny and Tucker were looking at the skateboard wheels. Well, Danny was pretending to look at the wheels. Since Sasuke revealed that Danielle was actually Danielle Phantom, he made sure to keep a close eye on her to see if his sensei was right. The more he thought about it, the more sense it made. Considering the fact he watched her transform to go fight the box ghost one night confirmed his theory. He just couldn't believe it. his little sister had gained ghost powers from the accident while he awakened his ancestor. Fate could be funny that way, it seemed. Danny had been tempted to reveal his secret to Danielle, and he even asked his sensei about it during one of their training sessions. A quick thump to the head told Danny all he needed about what his sensei thought about it. He told him a good shinobi would never reveal their secret so casually like that. So Danny decided that if it came down to it, if he really had to, he would tell his little sister eventually. Since when have you two been interested in skateboarding? Danielle asked with a smile while she and Gaara approached the two. Tucker shrugged. The ladies love a bad boy skater type. I feel like I should take offense to that, Danielle said, considering it would take more than a skateboard and a few fancy tricks to make you a bad boy, Tucker. Gaara smirked at his longtime friend who just stuck his tongue out in a childish manner. The friends walked away from the skateboard parts and ended up finding themselves at another stand that read, Madame Babazabit's Mystical Oddities. Tucker found what looked to be the classic genie bottle. Genie in the bottle? I don't think so. Our parents invent stuff that hunts ghosts and you're denying the existence of genies, Danielle said. It's possible, I mean a giant dragon did happen to crash our school dance, Danny added on to his sister's statement. Tucker placked down the bottle after giving it a quick rub and they began to walk away again. I won't believe it till I see it. Nobody seemed to notice the eerie green mist that started to curl its way out of the bottle. The end. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.